Sally, I hear something. Stop.
Oh, please! Please help!
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. From New Line Cinema. Rated R. No one under 17 admitted without parent or guardian. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready!
Orion Pictures presents Gene Wilder,
Holy baloney, here we go again.
Gilda Radner, and Dom DeLuise in his most demanding role.
One of you is a werewolf.
You'd think this would frighten me.
Haunted honeymoon.
Rated PG. Starts Friday, July 25th at a theater near you. Check your newspaper for times.
One clap, push it real good, real good. That was the biggest song of the whenever that came out. Baby, I miss those old videos,
Salt and Pepper
hip hop videos. Salt and Pepper.
I always felt bad that Spinderella didn't get more recognition because there's always three of them, and you're like, who the hell's the other lady?
It's Left Eye,
and that was Spinderella.
Died.
It was Salt Pepper. Yeah. It was Salt Pepper and Spinderella.
What's the other one? Who's Left Eye?
That was a different group.
That's and she died, I think. Left Eye. I thought that was Salt. No, I guess it wasn't Salt and Pepper. Don't go changing waterfalls. Who's that? That's that group.
Yeah.
I don't have my phone. I can't look up who that is. That's for fuck's sake.
And we can't get the interns on it because they're quarantined.
Oh God. Well, it's one of those things where it's like, we will know that when we stop recording, and then we don't record. Then we look like it's
Is that like TLC or something like that?
That's it, TLC. There you go. See, you just put your mind. It was TLC, and that was Left Eye, and the other ones, and yeah, that's when what's her face had a career too, doing all that. That's Paul Abdul, but then you also Queen Latifah was being all tough. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Isn't that weird? That's like all now. That's oldies.
It's the golden oldies on the
those are the
channel.
golden oldies. It's just all that old. It's so weird. There's an oldies channel, and I click it, and it's just 60s. It's 60s like Beatles, and that kind of 60s era music. That's the oldies now. It's like that's not the oldies. That's like classic rock, or not even classic rock. It's formative rock. Anyway.
So we digress.
Yeah, sorry. Welcome to an all-new, exciting edition of the Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers, this podcast.
My name is Jay Blake, and with me, as always,
is Dion to the Baia. Dion Baia, if you're not paying attention. And we're back for a regular installment in our 2020 series. It's a very limited edition series, and we're doing tonight an oldie but a goodie from back in the year of 1991.
1991, let me see.
Which we were kind of just reflecting about just a minute ago. We're doing Nothing But Trouble.
Nothing But Trouble. I always have linked in... What year was... We should have worked this out before. Because in my head, this is linked to Ghostbusters 2.
That's 89.
89
that might
is
be
Ghostbusters 2? That late?
Yeah, that might be the same summer as as Batman. That might be the movie we always forget that came out the summer of Batman. I had the Mad Magazine article or issue for Ghostbusters 2, and I don't think I saw Ghostbusters 2 in the theater. This is hard because, see, for me, I was in elementary school or primary school till 6th grade, and then I went to middle school.
18.
I was 18 until about 2 years ago. And then I went to middle school in 7th grade. And I had middle school for 7th and 8th grade. Then I had high school for 9 through 12. Didn't you do in Shenendahowa? Didn't you do like 7th grade, and then that was your high school? 7th, you were already in the same building?
Well, no, it was 7th, 8th, and 9th were in one school. So that was like our freshman year you were still in technically the middle school.
Middle school. Okay, because I know some people will go and they'll have the same, be everything once you leave elementary school. But so 7th and 8th for me was, Hamden Middle School. It was its own school before I went to high school. And that for me was the fall of 1991 was 91 to 92 was the 7th grade. So I remember that was such a huge, you're leaving your elementary school. And I don't think I thought anything of it until my two other friends, Martin and Chris, started really freaking out about it. And they're like, oh my God, this is going to be crazy. We're going to a whole different school, all these different other people. And I was like, oh yeah, that is a pretty big, it is crazy to see almost like,
you're right.
Suddenly so the night before you are shitting a brick and you go and everything's fine. But I remember, you go to middle school and it was just such a whole other world you're introduced to. And that's really when I started hearing, I guess I stopped listening so much to like hair metal and Aerosmith and, classic rock. And I started listening to other stuff because there were so many other people that I was now, hanging out with in classrooms from all over the whole town, so we had a big suburb. So this is my memory, even though I saw Nothing But Trouble in the theater, which means I had to have seen it when I was still in 6th grade, the winter of 91 into the spring. But then I have a memory of Nothing But Trouble being while I was in middle school in 7th grade because the Digital Underground song was so big at the time, Same Old Song, that like I equate that with the other movie, that song for Posse. It's the Posse, shoot 'em up, that silly Western from that era.
Mara Van Peebles.
Yeah, that movie. Yeah. And what's the other? The it's on the tip of my tongue. How's that? Tick tock, you don't stop. No. How does that song go? With the girl and the saxophone out in the water. Anyway, there's so much of like this early like. It's not gangster rap, but it's like hip hop, kind of like these songs of like also like OPP. But that all that is linked to me for this era, and I've always associated Nothing But Trouble with the Digital Underground, and then I saw this in the theater, and I don't know if I had to have seen it since, but I can't tell you when the last time I had a beginning to end viewing of this movie. So maybe when it came out on video, I watched it, like when it came out on the old Tommy K's video, but. This has literally been a 25-year. I mean, we're showing our age here.
Yeah.
Of last time I viewed this movie. This is so much pre-prep where it was like, Jesus, 10 or 15 years ago, I saw this thing like on a used DVD cart. And I was like, oh, wow. I grabbed it thinking, this is a really, I have a friend of mine that I work with that really loves this movie. So for years, he'd always talk about how Nothing But Trouble is such a great. And I'd be like, isn't that people don't like that now? Isn't that considered like a really bad movie? And he's like, it's the best movie. So talking to him, and I was like, yeah, it probably is a really good movie. And then I knew there was this cult following for it. So many years ago, I bought the DVD of this movie, and it just sat there on the shelf. And it's the Warner Brothers one, the one where it's like when DVDs were brand new, where it's the cardboard, you'd open it up, and then like inside on the binder, it has the proof of purchases, just in case you want to send them to random people. Like, I'm going to send it to you or my mom, the proof of purchase. There's enough there, and you put it in, and all it is just jump to a scene or just hit play with the Warner Brothers.
Special features.
Yeah.
Interactive
jump to
menu.
a scene. Exactly. See stills of other posters of movies we have available. You can't click on them. Like, I thought you could at least watch the trailer.
Doesn't even have like the written bios on it.
No, it doesn't have anything, like that. It just, or it does. It only has one person. It's Dan Aykroyd. You can't even. No, it doesn't. But So I've been having. This has been in my library for years to watch, and it wasn't until, just sitting there, just calling me.
Just waiting for this day. This day.
Yes, I knew this day would come, and it's finally come upon us. the Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers studio. I'm just going like this every time.
I did not.
So this was.
I did not see this in the theater, but I probably rented it when it was a new release. So maybe 92, 91, 92.
Yeah, 7th grade for you as well.
And that's the last time I saw it. So this is
now
nearly almost 30 years since I've seen
Isn't
this
that
movie.
crazy to think that? I called my dad up before we watched the movie, and I was talking to him about it because I was like, do you remember when me, you, and Martin went to see that? He was like, oh, yeah. And, like, you know, technically this movie flopped, but it wasn't because of me, my dad, or Martin. We went and we were paid. You know, we paid and saw it. I don't know if I saw it opening weekend.
I would have loved to have talked to your dad about what he thought of this movie, like as he walks out the theater.
Well, that was back then where I think we enjoyed movies like this. They just didn't need to make sense. These were just like, that was just a crazy movie, and that was the end of it. You're not sitting there like, you know, like my dad. I always remember him growing up telling me a story where he had a similar experience where him and his friends were driving down to and this is, so I called him today and I asked him about this, and I was like, do you remember that story you told me? And he's like, yeah, and he explained more of it. It's like he had an experience where he was driving down to maybe Florida. He was driving down in the South, and probably on his way from the Northeast down to Florida, and the interstate wasn't done yet. So it was one of these things where you'd have to get off the interstate and get on like whatever that route, whatever it is, and then catch the interstate when it's built again. So he said this was like a common way for these speed traps in these like smaller parishes or towns. They get off and then you'd still be going as fast as you were on these routes as you were on the highway. And you go through these like one-horse towns and or one-street towns. And he got pulled over by some cop in like a 50, Chevy. And they were like, with the big like, party hat on top, the little ball. And then the guy wasn't going to let him leave until so they had to pay him there, whatever they had in their wallets. And the guy let him go. And I remember that after this, the summer from middle school into freshman year, my parents, we went on a trip to we went from Connecticut north to New Hampshire to go check the Budweiser factory out. And then from there, we took a left and we went through Vermont into New York State to get to Lake George. So we spent a night in Vermont at like one of those ski lodges or ski cabins that was off season. So it was a really nice place, had a kitchen in it and all that, But it was usually where people would stay to go skiing. And on that journey, those 2 days, we went through a lot of these crazy towns where it was like, it reminded me back then of Nothing But Trouble, where it's like, it's just this one street town, and it's just like, this is the courthouse, this is also the sheriff's office, this is also the state department of records and all that kind of a thing. So I find this was something I think, my dad really liked when he saw it.
Yeah. Well, for anybody that hasn't seen it, I mean, there's a lot of, obviously, cast and crew we can get into, but in a nutshell, it's about this wealthy guy and his two friends and Demi Moore. Chevy Chase plays the wealthy guy, and they're trying to get to Atlantic City, and they take a detour off of the highway because for whatever reason.
They live in New York City, and they're leaving the city to go south to Atlantic City through Jersey.
And they basically end up getting pulled over, and then in this crazy, tiny little town, as Dion was kind of indicating. And I never really thought about it until we watched this movie and doing a little bit of research, that this is like a subgenre of kind of horror, because Psycho... get Janet Leigh's character kind of gets off, and she
gets off the interstate. Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like a group of people that kind of get off
the interstate,
off the beaten track. And
yeah, Vacancy.
I mean, Rocky Horror Picture Show does that. So I was like, oh, I guess this is like a thing. Like I never really thought about it before, but there is like this kind of subgenre of. Mistakenly, or not mistakenly, but unluckily, kind of
being diverted,
and finding yourself in some dire consequences, which I thought was
it's like
really interesting.
Psycho is like it's interesting to hear people talk about when they first saw Psycho and the lines wrapped around the theater, and then the whole shower sequence, and then spoiler alert, Janet Leigh's character getting killed in the first half hour. But it's like it gets set up like it's such a different movie, where she's she's embezzling money, she's on the run, she stops, she buys a car from what's his face Anderson. She gets into the car, and then she's trying to, and then it starts getting bad weather, so she just pulls off the main drag to just hide out for the night. And then because of her luck of finding something that's vacant, she goes, and then suddenly she's murdered, and then this whole other thing spawns off after it, where it should just keep going. That'd be a fun movie just to see what would have happened if Janet Leigh didn't get off the Marvel what if Janet Leigh didn't get off the highway, So you're right. There are these movies where it's like it's a different plot, but then for whatever reason, they get a flat tire or the car breaks down or whatever, and then they have to,
What's the
spend the
Kurt
night
Russell
somewhere.
movie where his wife
Breakdown?
That's another kind of similar.
Yeah.
The Hills Have Eyes, also kind of like
Hills Have Eyes.
a similar kind of concept.
A lot of these where it's just like the person, or they encounter some sort of, like that's the hitchhiker in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's funny because since I hadn't seen this, we can get into this later, but they say that Warner Brothers, who put this out, really kind of cut out a lot of the dirty or gorier. They wanted to give it a PG-13 rating. So that being said, that if there's a director's cut of this that is in fact a little more like grotesque and gruesome, you wonder, because when I watched this tonight, it was like this is pretty fucked up. It's like I'm watching this in 1991 in the theater, and the whole time it was a comedy for me because you're going into it looking at it like it's a comedy.
Yeah.
But you take that out and you have the for us the 30 years of since we've seen it, or 25 years, and then you watch it with a different kind of eye. This can be played straight and be like a horrific. It is, critics have described it like Beetlejuice meets Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it is in that subgenre. I would say it is closer to a Texas Chainsaw Massacre or like a Children Under the Stairs or The People Under the Stairs, as opposed to like a Beetlejuice. It has that more of that Americana, like Route 66, but like the leftovers of that bygone era of the 20s to like the 50s, and then it's what the generations have forgot that's still happening out there, and then you come across this, there's buses hanging out of the ground, and there's cars rotting in salvage yards, and and then you go into a 150-year-old house that's falling apart, that's very Victorian or Georgian, and then all of a sudden it has that beautiful, scary subgenre elements that is really terrifying.
Well, I mean, I think we kind of as we approach this year, we talked about, since we're doing less movies these days than we used to do, we kind of talked about that we would try to do movies that at least one of us was kind of really passionate about. Mm-hmm. And
Blake, you're showing my slip.
And, when you brought this up, I don't think either one of us has any kind of, specific nostalgia
affinity.
or affinity for it. But when you brought this up as a possibility, I was like, yeah, okay. Only because, aside from the thing that I bring up often when we do this show, which is this wonderful revisiting that we do of like the special effects and movie magic of past generations, getting to Total Recall, Black Hole, all that kind of stuff, where we get to look at the way movies used to be made and kind of explore that. In a related note, one of the great things about doing this show is going back and picking out like the things that in a weird way represent a past generation. Like when we did the like 1990 Captain America and like the 1994 unreleased version of Fantastic Four, I said like, when we did those shows, I talked about how I don't have any specific nostalgia or affinity for those movies. but they're so of their time that it's hard not to have some kind of weird nostalgia when you watch it because they represent so closely our childhood in a weird way, even though I didn't watch them. Those weren't movies that I grew up watching. This movie is a bit like that too. It's such a weird. It's maybe the weirdest movie we've done on the show so far.
You know, and it's almost like it has a little stamp of like we're part of the secret crowd because if we're of that generation, it's all our little secret. But you know, and I guess that's with every generation. But if you're younger, you don't know this movie. So like you're saying, if it's representative of an era or a generation, it's like we all have that. Like, oh yeah,
remember that movie? Remember how weird that movie was? So when you brought this, and it's a movie that we've, full disclosure, it's a movie that we've talked about doing since we started this show.
It was on one of the lists
because it was such a weird oddity for even then. But when you watch it now, it is a bizarre oddity for 1991. But also, that movie couldn't be made in any other decade. You know what I mean? Or any other half a decade. Movies that weird have been made before and have been made since. But the feel, the cast, the makeup effects, everything that comes together, Digital Underground being in the movie, like there's something that everything comes to a head of like early 90s.
All these like train crossings that pass that will never cross again. No junctions.
That makes it so specific to a certain era, which happens to be the era that we grew up in, that it was hard to come up with a reason for us not to do this show finally. Because like I said, it's been something that, when we started talking about the kinds of movies we would do on the show back, 6 years ago before we started doing the show, it'd be like, we could do something like Nothing But Trouble, because it was a movie that was like something that we would have rented with our friends. But so weird. And having not seen this movie in 28 years or whatever it is, there's this weird like dichotomy of it's just as weird as I remembered it being, but it's also not as weird as I remembered it being. In a weird way, it's hitting both parts where like, well, this isn't quite as weird as I remembered it being, but then, this is pretty fucking weird, and I remember it being fucking weird.
Yeah, it's for me, it's like it's just as weird as it is, and it's almost a little more weirder because of some of the stuff maybe I'm looking at now as an adult as opposed to watching it as a child.
There's that too, yeah.
The song I was thinking of that I couldn't remember, it popped into my head. It's Zoom a Zoom Zoom and a Boom Boom. Remember that? All I want to do is Zoom a Zoom Zoom. Just shake your rump. With the girl, the saxophone. Doo 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 doo. That's probably like circa 91, 92. Anyway, it's because it's so. This is. It's like you set the era up too. We're coming off of 1990, I believe. We just did Christmas Vacation last year. December 2019, and if I remember correctly, was that 89 or was that 90?
I want to say it was 89. I mean,
okay, I was going to say 90 because for me, Chevy Chase is huge because he's coming off of that. That was a big hit. He does Fletch Lives before this movie, which I don't think did very well because I don't think I've ever seen. I guess I don't. I think I've seen Fletch Lives, but I don't remember it very well.
It was Christmas Vacation was 89.
Okay.
Because I remember talking about how we moved to Albany, I think in 88.
And this was the first up there.
And I remember my brother only came for like one Christmas, and I thought it was the Christmas of 88, but I remember we went to go see this movie.
Which would be 89 then.
It must have been 89.
So you have Chevy Chase is huge, and he almost become near the end of this movie. He starts doing some action stuff. So I remember turning to you and I said, I wonder how far away this is from Memoirs of an Invisible Man, another movie Blake and I absolutely hold in such dear regard.
It's another forgotten
weird John Carpenter. Yeah, and lo and behold, aside from TV appearances and little bits here and there, his next big movie was Memoirs of an Invisible Man right after this, and. you look at the height in careers of, say, Chevy Chase, where, he was a megastar in the late 70s and 80s. He did the vacation movies, which were huge. I'd say the pinnacle of those movies was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
was the Texas Chainsaw Vacation.
Yeah, that's a great mashup right there.
National anthem.
Instead of going to, instead of they hit the wrong exit. Instead of getting to Randy Quaid's house, they go to the next house, and that's down there where they're like, look what your brother did to the door.
It's actually not that far off of this movie. If you just put the Griswolds in this movie, it's kind of be what that movie would be. Yeah,
so he's at the height of his, for me, career-wise, with Christmas Vacation, which is 89. And then he goes on, of course, I'm going to see the next thing he's in. I didn't see Fletch Lives at the time. So this comes out. I'm going to go see it. And then you look at his career trajectory, because then he does Invisible Man, and then he kind of just meanders in the 90s for me.
When does he when does he do his late night show? Remember he had a late night show.
I thought that was in the late 80s or early 90s, around that time, because this is also the era of Arsenio Hall. So everybody who's big and whatever, I was watching Arsenio Hall for like 3 or 4 years already at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was competition against Arsenio. I think it's Vegas Vacation comes out like in 97 or 98. And I couldn't tell you what's happening with Chevy Chase in that part, because that's when Jim Carrey blows up soon after this, because he's on In Living Color, which is around this era. All these other comedians come out of the woodwork and kind of replace what he's doing. And then Dan Aykroyd, the same thing. Dan Aykroyd's the biggest thing ever, in the early 80s, mid 80s, and then he kind of has some kind of weird clunkers. And then when he gets into this era, he directs this movie, and then the movie doesn't do really well. And then there's a movie which, to this day, full disclosure, I still never seen, Loose Cannons, with him and Gene Hackman, where my friend Martin went to the theater to see it. I remember that day, and he came back and said, "It was a great movie." Do you remember that? Where like Dan Aykroyd's like a nut, and they've got an ambulance or something, and Gene Hackman's the straight man in it or whatever like that. But I feel like that was after this. And then Dan Aykroyd's like, he does some serious movies, and he does like My Girl and My Girl 2, where he's the father.
Yeah.
But his career is kind of going downhill a little bit at this point. He's not, I don't think 3 years after this movie he would have still been able to come back and do a movie like this again. I mean, if you take this out of the equation, if this didn't flop or this had never been in 1991, I can't see a studio letting him do this movie in 1994 or 95, because by that time it's such a different world. So you had, and then, God bless freaking John Candy. John Candy's just putting out such great stuff at the time. So John Candy's in this movie. And then Demi Moore, I remember, it was just blowing up.
Yeah.
This might be the movie that kind of showed me to Demi Moore, although
I think this
Ghost
is
comes out.
I think he made Ghost before this. I mean, it was like...
Yeah, she shoots it before this. So maybe Ghost came out. I watched Ghost on the plane ride to Disneyland, my first Disney trip. So that was Rocketeer. Remember I tell you, as I was starting to see, it was January of, maybe that's 91? That was 6th grade. January of 91 is, I went to Disneyland. So that would have been right around the time I saw Nothing But Trouble. So I saw Ghost on the plane. So I think Ghost is 1990.
90, yeah.
So, yeah, so that's a huge movie. That puts her, I hadn't seen prior to that the movie She's Pregnant with Michael Biehn. What's that horror? She's having Bruce Willis.
We always say this movie. We never remember. Seventh Sign, maybe.
Seventh Seal, the Seventh Sign. Yeah. So it's like I didn't know her, and I didn't know her from her. Didn't she? She was part of like the Brat Pack, kind of.
Yeah, she might have been in. What's that called?
One of those huge movies.
St. Elmo's Fire. Maybe she was in that.
Yeah. So. And then I remember her being so hot in this movie. Like, even to me, this is not that quite revealing, her outfit. But at the time, like, you're looking where the camera's making you look. So you're looking at her legs when she's bending over. You're looking at her cleavage and stuff like that. So this had everybody in it. So it's like, that's the reason why, on a Saturday afternoon, before my dad's going into work, he's like, Dion, call your friend Martin up. We're going to go see Nothing But Trouble. I'm like, okay, I can't wait. And then we get in there, and it's like, from watching the trailer again, it's funny because sometimes you can remember what the trailer cut is. So if you've seen a trailer a couple times, when I go rewatch these trailers, I'm like, oh yeah, this is how it's cut, and the trailer has Peter Cullen voiceover extraordinaire, a.k.a. Optimus Prime, is like, Chevy Chase, and, Autobots roll out, nothing but trouble. It's like, he's doing the voiceover stuff. So it's like, it's funny. You see these jokes lined up, and you're like, oh, yeah, you remember the jokes and the gags more from the trailer than from the movie. So I don't remember going to this movie and disliking it. I would have to think about a movie that I went to see, and then when I came out, I was like, that was fucking terrible. So I remember having a good experience. Like, what was your expectation level going into this? Yeah. It's like, it's going to be a quirky, crazy Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd movie. I think it got a little too weirder than I thought with the mutant babies in the salvage yard. But I remember, and I remember more stuff about the movie which didn't happen here. So I for some reason I had a memory of they say something about Chevy Chase about he comes from a family of wealthy financiers. So I thought they were going to link his great grandfather to the guy who sold Dan Aykroyd's family, took the oil rights away or whatever. But that didn't happen. So and in full disclosure, rewatching this, it's like I freaking loved it. I mean, I was like, this is great. I don't know why people just gave it such a notoriously Roger Ebert wouldn't even review it. It was so bad. I mean, he refused to even. And it's like I don't think it's. I can think of far worse movies from that era. The era of Problem Child 2, all these movies. Those aren't bad movies. Nuns on the Run. It's such a quirky era of these crazy comedies. It's just par of course.
Yeah, I loved the spectacle of it. You know what I mean? I don't know if I loved it like as a movie. I think it's really flawed. I think John Candy's kind of wasted in it. Yeah. I think it's pretty clear that Chevy Chase does not give a shit about it while you're watching it.
Well, that's it. But was that your?
But it's hard not to. Being someone of our generation, it's hard not to watch it and just revel in like the weirdness of the makeup, Aykroyd's apparent as a director, writer. And you actually find out that a lot of these things that you do research were pitched to him by crew members. But this apparent, as you watch it, not knowing anything about how it's made, what appears to be his apparent fascination with gadgetry, which I guess makes sense because when you think of like Ghostbusters, and which he also wrote, and even not so much of in Blues Brothers, but this idea of the car of the police car being like special and whatnot.
Like machines.
Yeah, like you get this sense that he has this fascination and affinity for machinery and gadgetry and stuff, and it seems like that when you watch this, it's on like full display. But it's also a little sign of the times. Late 80s to early 90s. We talk about like Webster having a secret passage that goes down to like another room, or you watch something like Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which we did on the show, which comes out before this, obviously, but like Pee-wee's house having all those,
Pee-wee's Playhouse is of this era.
Pee-wee's Playhouse,
or just coming out,
late and then mid 80s, but Back to the Future, like Doc Brown's machinery to feed the dog. It seems like.
Remember Clue, which we did on this show? Clue has all the passageways in the mansion.
If you were going to make like a list of like the weird things that I guess children of our generation were fascinated with because we were being fed them, it would be like weird gadgetry, secret passages, ninjas,
treasure hunts, pirates,
like all these. It's just like this
tree houses.
They're so they're so specific to our childhood in a weird way, and maybe they're not. I just perceive them that way. But so to get back on track, watching Nothing But Trouble, like all the weird gadgetry, the weird makeup, the over the top set pieces, the over the top sets, the couple of shots you get that are clearly like matte paintings, even if they are augmented by early CGI, I don't know.
Look good.
And just like the sheer fucking weirdness of it. It's like it's hard it's hard not to watch that and at least, I don't know, have someone who's younger today or someone that's older or whatever. But for our generation, at least for me, it was hard to watch this movie and not just be like captivated and engaged by all like the weirdness that was so specific to us.
I agree with you. John Candy's underused as the cop part. I like him having them show up as the mute sister, and this is of the era where around '89, I think it is, Back to the Future 2. You start really seeing great examples of having the same actor on the screen, where they have the special effect with like a diopter lens, or there was a special way they were doing it where the camera would do a take and then come back and do a take again robotically and get the same thing. So this was still a new idea when you see that shot of John Candy on screen with John Candy, and it looks 90% great, it still holds up. But I remember that's something when they show that off in the trailer again, back me to the trailer, and it's like you're like, ooh, how are they, they're doing that, So it's like some of the, the budget they had, and for me rewatching, it's almost like the set design of this, and to just think about the level of what's his name, Michael Lanterry, I think his name is, who did the set pieces for this, and just all the breadcrumbs they leave of, there's so much to read into that they don't even get into of this, where it's just, there's so much, like you said, the gadgets or the gimmicks in the movie, the set pieces, the sets themselves, and like the license plates that they have all around, or the IDs, or the drawbridges, the judges' gadgets of him coming up and down off the courthouse, off the bench, or even like the train going around on the dinner table. Like all that stuff is just like they threw money at this thing, and it's just it begs a question of like a backstory or a prequel. I would love to see a prequel to this movie to learn where we get to like to this point, and I would love to see a foreign remake of this movie that's completely straight, like the guys who did like High Tension and all those, or like those whatever the Australian horror movies, like give me a straight version, but which I guess would technically be the Texas Chainsaw Massacres.
To a
would
certain
probably be a
extent,
straight version of this.
I mean, in a weird way, it's also like a similar plot to something, not so much, but to like something like Doc Hollywood, which is like he's a big city doctor, rolls into this small town. I forget the plot, but I feel like he crashes into a fence, and then he's like
stuck in the town,
to stay in town while his car's getting fixed and be a doctor. Which
is also the plot a couple years later in Oliver Stone's U-Turn. Sean Penn's Mustang breaks down in a small town. The town's full of all cameos, and then he's stuck in this town because Billy Bob Thornton, takes his car apart. It's one of these movies. You're stuck in the town, and then you're, so it has all these elements.
It's like Doc Hollywood is around sometime around this time as well.
Yeah, this is 80, 88, 89, 90, yeah. That's another movie I never saw. I've never seen Doc Hollywood, but I remember being at a Yankees game and then like every other inning playing the trailer of it on the big jumbo screen. So they must have been coming out, and that was it, like the car hitting the white picket fence and his sports car, and it's like, Michael J. Fox is a doctor stuck in a small town.
I actually
with
like
nothing
that
to do.
I like that movie a lot, but I think I like it a lot for the same reasons that I like Hallmark movies, because that actually is like the plot of several Hallmark movies that just rip off Doc Hollywood. So like a small,
so you write your
like a big city doctor in a small town is like a subgenre of Hallmark movies, and so like I think I just have an affinity for that kind of quaint innocent storytelling.
See, you should do your mashup. You do a Hallmark movie, but then you have it be like Nothing But Trouble, where they get stuck in this town, and it's... You could go two ways with it. You make it a comedy where it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a dark comedy where you're trying to like help the people like get better while they're killing people. Like, you can't do that, you know? Or the other side of it is that you're stuck in the town and all this quirkiness is going on. And then, you know, this is the birth of the indie movie in a couple of years. And there's a movie I always talk about, Ed and His Dead Mother with Steve Buscemi, which is a really quirky... You get a lot of these quirky movies that come out. And it kind of splits where you have... those quirky movies that come and go that come out that are like these weird comedies or just really weird esoteric movies that are in the comedy genre, or you get those big budget ones that come and go. Like I love Rodney Dangerfield. There's a movie Meet Wally Sparks that came out in the mid to late 90s, which I don't even know if it's come on DVD yet. You know, so some of these movies that you just, you know, Opportunity Knocks, which is from I think 1990 with Dana Carvey, is around this time. You have a lot of these, you know, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, isn't this around? I think this time 91, 92.
Yeah, probably. You also like in terms of weirdness, and like far out. Just like over the top craziness. It's like a couple years after this, you get that Mario Brothers movie.
Sure,
you know
I think that's this year. That's either 91 or 92 because I had that in 7th grade. I went to see. It's a story not to get into on the podcast, but I went to see that. A friend of mine who I had met at in middle school, his dad worked at the local popular music radio station, Kiss 95.7. So they played all this kind of the radio edits of these really radio friendly hip hop, and so they were hosting a sneak peek of Mario Brothers. And the only time I've ever seen Mario Brothers was I went with my friends for a sneak peek, and that was around this time. So it's like of that. This is all Addams Family is all that remind MC Hammer, you know,
which is I think this is the Ninja Turtles, which we did had the also
Secret of the Ooze is here.
Yeah,
that's this is the era of Vanilla Ice. This is the era of Too Legit to Quit. Addams Family Values, probably, you know. So all this and these people who were comedic icons in the era, you know, John Candy, Chevy Chase, and Dan Aykroyd. You know, I mean, John Candy meets with a terribly untimely death, but the other guys are kind of like coming. You know, they're still of the, you know, like you said, this is very much an 80s movie, even though it's 1990, released in 91. But you're using these comedic icons from that era. And then within a year or two, you're going to have like the Jim Carreys, all these other people just break out.
Sure.
You're going to have all these other crazy comedies that, you know, and then, like I said, I feel like these movies, guys get eclipsed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we get Wayne's World just shortly after this. A year or two after this, which we did on the show, in case anybody's interested. But it's a fact. There's also almost as equally fascinating as the craziness of this movie. I find the genesis and the making of this movie pretty interesting as well. So maybe we should dive into that.
Well, the story here?
Well, we don't have to if you don't want to.
I don't know if I want to. Well, I don't think we want to do that this week. So you get Dan Aykroyd and his friend, the producer, Weiss, right?
Yeah. Robert K. Weiss.
Yeah, Robert K. Weiss.
Who had produced like Blues Brothers with Dan Aykroyd, several things.
Yeah, and they're friends together, and he had just hurt himself, and they were all gonna go to a movie. Him and his maybe the other brother, was it the Dan Aykroyd's brother? Maybe
there's conflicting stories when you try to research this. Some say that it's Dan Aykroyd and Robert K. Weiss decide to go to a movie, and then some stories say that it's. And then what happens in that exchange? Dan Aykroyd then goes and talks to his brother later, and then there are some stories online where it was Dan Aykroyd, his brother Peter, and Robert K. Weiss all went to the movie together. So there's kind of conflicting stories, but the gist, the spirit of the story and what happens in the story is the same in all renditions.
Yeah, Aykroyd knows Weiss because they did Dr. Detroit, Blues Brothers, like you said, and then Dragnet as well. And they go to the theater, and he hurt himself, Weiss, so he's bruised a rib. And he says he just can't go see a comedy because he can't laugh. So they're looking for a movie, and then I guess Aykroyd says, we'll go see a horror movie because that's, you're not going to laugh at a horror movie. That'll be fine for you. And he's like, okay, because I'm really sore. And they go see, this is why I said I don't know if I wanted to tell the story. They go see Hellraiser. And this is what I don't understand. So from your point of view, they say they go to see Hellraiser and everyone's just laughing in the theater. And I don't remember Hellraiser being like schlocky horror. No. Especially if I watch it now. But even back then, I would think, it's a unique audience to have. You don't have a bunch of millennial hipsters in the theater. It's like, I mean, but there is something that happens in horror movies when you go see horror movies. And it could be that, this story of Dan Aykroyd and Robert K. Weiss gets kind of blown out of proportion a little bit. But there's something that happens when you go see horror movies sometimes, which is uncomfortable laughter. You know what I mean? Where it's not necessarily that they find it funny. Sometimes it is, and it's because you're seeing something retroactively or retrospectively, and things like become cliche over time. And we've talked about our frustrations with going to see movies. It could be that. It could also just be like I would hope so.
It could also just be like the overtopness of Hellraiser, which is pretty over the top. And I've full disclosure, I've never seen Hellraiser with an audience. I've only ever watched it like by myself or with one or two other people at home.
Yeah.
And maybe the energy of an audience creates some kind of laughter. But so I don't know. You're right. I mean, I never thought of it as being like an extremely like campy, cheesy movie to laugh at. But it could just be a thing of, like I said,
the uncomfortability.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to go with.
Well,
we're going to go with, they were so uncomfortable with the horrificness of Andy Robinson saying like, and what is it? And Christ wept. That, what do you call it? That they were laughing. So as our story rolls on, I guess Aykroyd, seeing the reaction of the audience laughing at this horrific horror movie, he suddenly wanted to make a comedic horror movie. So, and then this also has origins to another movie which I have near and dear to my heart, which I haven't seen in years, called Haunted Honeymoon, which is a Gene Wilder movie, which is from the 80s, which is kind of like a horror. So that genre had been played with for a number of years. Even going back to Mel Brooks with Young Frankenstein, the horrific comedy.
Or Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
Or Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
By this point, by this point, we even had Evil Dead 2.
Yeah. So that launched. They did another 5 or 6 movies. Abbott and Costello doing meeting horror people, and even the Ghostbusters, the live action 70s with what's his face from F Troop, and the gorilla that they turned into the cartoon.
Well, even Ghostbusters is a horror comedy. I mean, really.
Yeah, it's what it seems to be is that a lot of people, like even with Evil Dead, I would assume it set out to be a straight horror movie, but then not the campiness, but there's a way they can lean it. And it becomes funny inherently, not because of the gags or whatever, but just maybe because of, like you said, the uncomfortability. And a lot of these big budget movies, like a Ghostbusters, I feel like they become comedies because the studio is uncomfortable with how they want to market it. So because of it becoming not letting them have it be a straight horror movie, you put the gags in. I mean, it's also good script writing that you put a funny bit in, and it gives the uncomfortable people the release of a laugh, and then a minute later you could scare the crap out of them again. But it seems like, say, like this movie had to lend itself to be a little more comedic because the gross out gags they'd cut out.
Yeah.
So I always feel like sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it's imposed on you by the studio that, like, let's make it more of a comedy, and you're like, then it kind of blows itself up. So this movie seems like they wanted it to be a little more dirtier, and there is a director's cut somewhere of it, but which I would love to see if it ever got a Blu-ray release, because this isn't on Blu-ray, and I don't even think it's available in widescreen.
Yeah,
the DVD I talked about that I own isn't widescreen. It's just, and evidently it's pretty wide from what I've heard, so that's a shame. So getting back on track, Aykroyd comes up with an idea. I want to make a movie like this, and this was back in the time where he was big enough to, I guess, start pitching. He has a lot of great writing credits and stuff like that, and he had done. At this point with Warner Brothers, he had done Spies Like Us with Warner Brothers, and he had done Driving Miss Daisy with Warner Brothers. And Driving Miss Daisy, although he only has a co-star in it, that was a huge hit. So I guess he goes to Warner's pitching, and there's another element of the story which, with the urban folklore, there's a discrepancy where it's either it happens to Dan Aykroyd himself or it happens to his brother Peter Aykroyd, where they're driving in upstate New York. The story I heard is that when Aykroyd in the late 70s, commuting back from Saturday Night Live, he's going to Canada, maybe, I don't know, during the week or whatever. I can't see him commuting for that one day because with the rigorous schedule. Yeah. But he's driving, and I could see him driving because back in the day, a lot of people used to drive cross country. He's a big motorhead. He likes cars, so he's driving up. And the story is, if it's either his brother or himself, is that he's pulled over late at night up in the boondocks of New York State, up north, going towards the Canadian border. And he gets pulled over for he's speeding, and the cop won't let him pay a ticket or pay a fine right there. The cop actually makes him follow him at 2 a.m, 8 miles to some little like town. And in the town, they have this little house that's also the justice of the peace. It's also the judge. It's also the sheriff. They wake the judge up, and then he has to go in front of a judge, and then he pleads his case out, whatever. Then after that's done, then there's various accounts. If the judge is a male or a female, the judge asks him to stay for tea. Now, I don't know if that means tea in the sense that have cups of tea, or the English term for having dinner is stay for tea. So if this is being told to us by someone who wrote it British, it could be that they said, like, you want to stay and have some food. Yeah. And then so the story is Aykroyd stays for like 4 hours. So evidently he had at the end of it, he elected to stay for a while and just shoot the shit with this person. So he stays there, and then he gets out of the ticket and his life goes on. So years later, he keeps that in his head. That is an idea that comes back to him because, like I alluded to earlier in this podcast, is like, I've encountered these weird towns, where it is like, wow, they could, so that's another thing I thought where they were going in this story, because when we're jumping all around, but when the judge is on the bench and he starts yelling at them about the Vulcanvania, and Demi Moore's like, what, you're talking pre-Magna Carta? I thought they were alluding to that because if this was formed before all that, maybe it was almost like the Vatican. It was its own little, so they could do whatever the hell they want because you're on their, their country property. But they never, that's another thing that just, I thought if you had one more line, that would completely make sense. That, of course they can put you to death because if you're in Vulcanvania, they go by their own laws, whatever. So, getting back to the story, he decides to take Dan Aykroyd, I guess Peter Aykroyd, right? Yeah. The both of them decide to write the story. Yeah, well, the spec script.
That's why it gets kind of hairy, because in terms of accuracy, because, like Dion said, there's conflicting stories. Some of the stories are that the story happened to Dan Aykroyd, but Peter Aykroyd was the one like, hey, why don't you do it? Why don't you do a horror, comedy horror of that story? Because Peter Aykroyd doesn't get screenwriting credit, but he does get story by. So, but if it's really Dan Aykroyd's story, then I know it's confusing. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But it seems to be that
one of the Aykroyd brothers.
Yeah, it happened to one of the Aykroyd brothers, and they collaborated on it in some fashion, although it's kind of unclear because Dan Aykroyd gets screenplay credit, but Peter Aykroyd gets story by credit.
Yeah, so I that's what I don't understand is who gets what, and I didn't realize until watching the credits in this that he's actually in it. He has a small part as the Mike the Doorman, the Irish guy, for Chevy Chase's building. Who he has a pretty funny role in it. So they end up writing this spec script that they first entitled Git, which is also another kind of, British kind of I know it as a British name, a Git. So, and it's the story of a rich what we have here, rich financier, rich guy from the city who gets, like we said, stuck in this, bumblefuck town, and then, he gets it is kind of a weird, like almost like a Tales from the Crypt episode. Yeah. Kind of come up in,
it kind of feels like it.
And then also there's a big twist at the very, very end of the movie. There's a twist that they know the judge. There's a twist at the very end. The funny joke was that, they're going to come. So there's a lot of, so it has that EC kind of feel. Yeah. So, and it straddles, it's certainly in the world of comedy because of who's in it. but it very easily can go either way. Bone Stripper, by Damn Yankees. Bone Stripper, it's like it has this horrifying aspect of it, which is kind of just and I don't know. What is your breakdown of it? I mean, as we're going on here.
Well, I think just little trivial things. Reportedly, it took Aykroyd 6 months to write that initial screenplay that Dion's talking about. It goes through several title changes. Starts out as GIT, as Dion said, and then it becomes Road to Ruin.
Yep.
And then eventually, I think while they're shooting it, it gets changed to Vulcanvania, which is the name of the town.
Well, they get Trick House. They turn it from Road to Ruin. It goes to Trick House, then to Vulcanvania while they're shooting. And I think that was going to be the title to be released until Warner takes it.
And it might have even been initially promoted that way. Not the trailer yet, but like an announcement that this movie's coming out.
Called Vulcanvania. And then when Warner takes it and recuts it, it turns into they rename it Nothing But Trouble.
They say
because of a Demi Moore line.
Yeah, they say a young Dion's going to want the name of the movie to be said within the movie, so we need to name it something.
You're Nothing But Trouble, and I was like, that's it. See, it proves my hypothesis. Every movie must have its title in it as a young Dion.
Apparently,
it's like the world's filling to maximum overdrive. Sorry.
Apparently, Dan Aykroyd, he's the one that may have initially given it this comparison that Dion brought earlier, which is like kind of Beetlejuice meets Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But again, all this information is kind of hearsay and a bit conflicting. One of the things that I thought was interesting about it is that he bases the town, Vulcanvania, kind of on this Centralia, Pennsylvania, which apparently was like a
real town.
Which was a real town and is a real town in Pennsylvania, and it was a coal mining town. And then at some point in like 1962 or so, in the early 60s, a coal fire started out underneath the town, and it kind of ruined the town. And now it's just like this empty town with big fissures in the ground, and that. So
supposedly, I guess the coal fire's still burning, and now the town's abandoned.
At least as of 1991, I
don't know, but I mean, that's such an interesting idea that the backstory of that they have this town that because you get down to that area, Jersey, Pennsylvania, whatever, there's a lot of mining, coal mining. There's a lot of the fossil fuels, so it is an interesting idea that there is a town that again, it's like these breadcrumbs they leave for other things that aren't really explained except with one-off sentences, which you and I talk about all the time on this podcast about. I love that. The Gulf fire over freaking what's the name of that? From we talk about from Escape from New York.
Oh, yeah, Escape from New York.
The Gulf fire over Leningrad. These one-off lines, and they say in the movie, Dan Aykroyd says that a coal fire has been burning under Vulcanvania since a mine fire since 1926. So it just leaves you thinking like, wow, and that's the reason why you have all these fissures under the ground that are sometimes unstable or whatever. Or at any point, the place could blow up, and then you think that's a farce. But then, like this Centralia in Pennsylvania, this town, this actually happened. You think about they do have all these mines, and you look at My Bloody Valentine, or you can make tons of horror movies about mines. And sometimes in real life, they're horror movies, like The People Who Got Stuck in Chile. I think it was some number of years ago that came out alive, that they made a movie about that actual stuff like this happens.
The series finale of Quantum Leap talks about
was that the mine file
people getting stuck in a mine
with Bruce O'Gill? Maybe has God as the bartender, if I remember. I haven't seen that since it aired. But see, so I love all that. So we get back to. That's a real aspect that there's a place in Pennsylvania that is like that. So, and Aykroyd.
I was just going to say, and one of the other interesting, because Aykroyd seems like a weird and interesting guy. I mean, when we did Blues Brothers on the show with Mike Vanderbilt, we talked about how like his initial script was 300 pages, and it went into like.
Well, he has like a psychology degree. If I remember correctly, he went to college for his. He comes from a very, very smart family and not wealthy, but I think they're upper middle class, and maybe they're even hold a government office in Canada. He's Canadian. Second City, I think, isn't he from that whole troupe? Yeah. And so he's very smart intellectually. And then, like you're saying, so when he writes the Blues Brothers, it's a phone book because it's just there's so much shit he's trying to come out, and that's all his affinity for blues music and stuff.
Descriptions of the car and all this stuff, and then it was John Landis that kind of whittled it down to the script that becomes the movie. But also, Ghostbusters comes out of the fact that he's very much like a paranormal theorist and fascinated with the paranormal and aliens and ghosts and all that stuff. So I think he's a really fascinating. He's got a very interesting mind. And so when you also read that, like, the giant mutant babies in this movie are based on a series of dreams that Aykroyd was having at the time.
Sure.
So it's just like...
It lends to it.
He seems like it would be a fascinating... Like, you had texted me while we were researching this movie before we watched it, which was like, this would be... It would be amazing to just interview Aykroyd about this movie.
And what his thoughts are, because I'm sure he doesn't get a lot of questions about.
But I'm sure he would
specifically.
But I'm sure he would just be a fascinating person to just talk to, in general.
Yeah,
like maybe not so much like on a promotional interview, like he's promoting something specific, but to just sit down and talk to him and just pick his brain about things, I'm sure he'd be fascinating. Since he's such a big Motorhead, you get the Blues Brothers out of that. You get the Ecto One, the old Cadillac hearse. I think those the elements of him of being the Detroit Mopar kind of a guy, that all lends itself to this, and where you have a lot of the technology or the machinery, the Americana car aspects of this. And like you said, he's huge into the paranormal. He's huge into aliens. He has that huge affinity. He put out an alien documentary in 2003 or 4. I've said this before on the cast. My wife's father used to be a huge guy in UFO. In that world, he helmed the biggest UFO magazine in the world out of the UK, and he passed away in 2003, and they sold the magazine rights and library to Aykroyd, and he used that stuff to put out that documentary they did in 2003 or 4 on UFOs. So he has a huge affinity. I've met him twice at my day job. One time is this crazy story I won't get into here, but the second time more recently was when he was promoting his vodka. He had that Skull vodka. Yeah, which is based on the Crystal Skulls.
And from what talking to him, it's that vodka is actually the number 1 vodka in Russia because of how he distills it. He distills it through like a diamond. I forget the process of distilling it and getting all the impurities out of it and stuff like that. But it's a very popular vodka. A lot of people like it because of what it comes in, the different size skulls, and I think they're, like you said, they're kind of a crystal, the glass. And I spoke to him about my deceased father-in-law, and that's so he's like, oh, okay, and it clicked. So we chatted for a minute, and we were just shooting the shit. And he was of that time I met him. He was very nice. Very, very nice. And like you said, it'd be great to just sit down and just pick his brain about all the weird, if you do your research on him and you're informed and you're not just going in, like you say, just to interview him about the Blues Brothers or Ghostbusters. Yeah. There's so much stuff that you could just, like, eclectic shit like this, nothing but trouble. You can ask him about, his paranormal, I don't know if it was he had seen aliens in growing up in Canada or something like that, or what his affinity to the paranormal is, but it is because of him we have the Ghostbusters, or it is because of him we have the Blues Brothers. So it's all these, or this movie. So it would be interesting to talk to him about just from a writing standpoint or his ideas, because I'm blanking right now, but I feel like there are 3 or 4 other things that he's written or done that you can be like, well, what about this specifically? Even musically, like you're a blues musician, so he'd be interesting just to talk to you about then musical theory and why he likes the Down Child Blues Band, or all the different things that he brings, so that when you come to this and he suddenly has a musical segment of Digital Underground in this movie, at first you watch it now out of context, this is really why does the movie stop and there's almost a musical sequence? Well, it's like, that's not new ground for Aykroyd, because they do that in the Blues Brothers, they do that, and I'm sure there's another movie that so it kind of makes sense at the time, and it's kind of almost forward thinking because he's bringing almost a new genre into it to open this movie potentially to another audience that might not see it or care to see it.
Yeah. But moving along, back on track.
Moving right along.
Apparently, Aykroyd initially offers the script or pitches the script to John Hughes, who apparently likes it. There's parts about it that he likes, so he doesn't turn it down right away, but eventually does ultimately turn it down because he says he only directs the scripts he writes.
Is that true? I guess he's only directed stuff he's written.
I guess. I know he's written more things than he's directed. I mean, I think he more considers himself, or considered himself since he's passed away, a writer than a director. But he pitches it to John Landis, who doesn't like it, and
well, the whatever Hughes' help with this, because you said like he likes it a lot. If you watch the credits, it does say in a very special thanks to John Hughes. So John Hughes must have had some sort of
maybe
input in it enough to get a credit.
Yeah.
Like you said, then he goes to John Landis,
who just doesn't like it and turns it down. And I also heard that he also offered it to Ivan Reitman, who obviously he had done Blues Brothers with, and stuff.
And you think about what is Landis doing? Landis doing like It Isn't Blood around this time, maybe 91.
Yeah, I don't
92,
know.
Because he's coming off of Three Amigos.
Sure.
And that's also is that no, that's not Aykroyd. Who's that Aykroyd? Is it Chevy Chase? No, it's Chevy Chase, Steve Martin, and Martin Short.
Martin Short, yeah, but still,
or maybe Dan Aykroyd plays another role in it. I don't know. I haven't seen that movie in so many years.
I saw that at the movies. I remember going to see that.
Wow. But I always feel like Landis's career hadn't fully recovered since the whole Twilight Zone thing. Although he made a bunch of successful movies going into the late 80s with Eddie Murphy and into the 90s, and then they did what is it, the middle or early 90s? There's the third Beverly Hills Cop, which I think kind of flops.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting at the time that he's bouncing around. It's like he from the stories you read about this, it just seems like Landis comes off kind of like a dick. Like he automatically turns it down. Like it's like me letting Blake see something and Blake's like, no, throws it back in my face.
Well, it's a pretty
take a night.
I could say it's a pretty. It's a script that's pretty specific. I could see somebody reading this and be like, yeah, like this is not this is not me. You should find somebody else. But ultimately, they want to get going on the script, and
but it's a good pitch though because he's a horror movie. He did the Blues Brothers, which is the crazy car, and then he did the Twilight Zone, but then he also did
American
Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, and then he's gonna do Innocent Blood. Maybe that's the reason why he doesn't want to do too much of the same thing.
But ultimately, I guess so that it doesn't get passed by, Aykroyd kind of offers to direct it, right?
Well, he's at the same time. I think he's pitching it around, and Warner's gets interested because of the word of mouth, because they're pitching the script, and Warner's gets in. Like I said, Aykroyd had a good working relationship with them, and he goes to Warner, and he's like, whatever they greenlight the budget for, he says, I want to play the main character in the movie, the financier, the finance investor, and I also want to play the judge in it. And then Warner comes back and says, we'll do the movie, but we want to cast Chevy Chase as the financier, the finance advisor he's in it, the financial investment counseling or financial publisher he is in the movie. And Aykroyd says, sure, and Warner has Chevy Chase on the mind because they've done all the successful vacation movies with Chevy Chase. So this is what I said to you a little earlier in this, is that when you bring Chevy Chase into the loop here, and before we get into all the stuff with Chevy Chase, do you feel like when I watched it again on this rewatch, knowing what we're about to talk about, do you feel like Chevy Chase is just like, because I felt like he's just being Chevy Chase like he is in any other movie, the nonchalant kind of way. Like, to me, it doesn't seem so much through he's walking through the part like I've seen in other movies, which I can't cite right now.
Yeah.
Like even when I saw the movie in the theater, I didn't think it was him just taking a paycheck. I thought he was involved. You're getting Chevy Chase in his 50s or whatever, however old he is there. You know what I mean? It's just as much as he's going to put into like Memoirs of an Invisible Man in a year or two.
But you have to take one thing I thought about while we watched this, and then when you research it and you hear about kind of how much of a dick he was, one of the times that Dion came with me to Monster Mania, and we had a table there, and we were, meeting listeners for the show, but also selling copies of my book and whatnot, Scored to Death, conversations with some of horror's greatest composers. One of the times that we were there, John Carpenter was also there. And we went over. I think it was the time with you. We went over to see him speak. We kind of walked in late, and he was doing a Q&A on like the Saturday night. And somebody asked him. Somebody asked, like, "Can you talk a little bit about the Memoirs of an Invisible Man?" And he's just like, "Yeah, Chevy Chase is an asshole." That's all he said about the movie.
And that is from. I've only heard one good thing. Even before I was in the industry, I had a manager at a party store telling me that he met Chevy Chase once at a basketball game, and he was really nice to him. And that's the only other time I've heard nothing but horror stories from people who've met Chevy Chase, either word of mouth like this or colloquially through these research we do. And it goes back to the story of when Chevy Chase bails from Saturday Night Live very quickly, and that's where the animosity builds, that there's supposedly a fist fight between Bill Murray and Chevy Chase backstage when Chevy Chase comes back to host whatever the year that is, because Dan Aykroyd and Belushi are fueling Murray because there's such a dislike for Chevy Chase. And I think Chevy Chase, I might be wrong, but I think his upbringing in this is that he comes on as a writer, I think, for Saturday Night Live, and then they quickly he pitches himself, so he writes skits to have himself in, and that's how he's able to get on in front of the camera on Saturday Night Live, and that starts a career. And then he blossoms very quickly, and there's a bunch of movies he's in that sometimes people forget. He's in that Goldie Hawn movie with that hilarious Dudley Moore sequence. Yeah. He's in a bunch of movies in the late 70s. And then as his star power grows, that's all I hear is that he's a real dick. And that's just, Well,
I feel like
so not needed.
I feel like when we did Christmas Vacation last year, I feel like there was somebody else was signed on to direct it. I could be wrong, but I recall that was somebody else was going to direct it, but then he just couldn't get along with Chevy Chase, so he left the project or something.
Yeah, and then I hear that, and this comes to here where Chevy Chase signs on, Warner's gets him to do what he's doing, and he's friends with Aykroyd, sure. And then once they get on set, it's kind of like, what did we just talk about? Peter Sellers with the director who did The Changeling. For that Ghost of whatever, the Peter Sellers movie that never came out. Once Aykroyd or Chevy Chase gets on set, Chevy Chase just like hates it, and he's evidently berating Aykroyd in front of the crew about he's more important because he's getting paid more on the set, and he's yelling at Demi Moore because their clothes are too skimpy. Which what's the complaint there for what they're doing? Yeah. And to the point where the crew starts sticking up for Aykroyd. And there's stories where Chevy Chase the night later will call up and apologize individually to the people, which I can believe. Take them aside like, "I'm sorry for berating you in front of the crew." But it's like that's not needed in this. And so, but evidently, Chevy Chase makes it a very unpleasant experience from his point of view because he's... So this comes around to the question I proposed to Blake is, do you feel like the performance, that's kind of channeled into the performance here?
Yeah, it's a tough call. I mean, because
you said earlier you said you kind of feel like he's just like, just bumping his shoes along, dragging his shoes along through the role.
Yeah, I guess I did, but it's also coming off of hearing all these stories about him being an asshole on things. So maybe it could have just been me like reading into it. I feel like he does have a brand of comedy. I mean, I feel like the Clark Griswold character is more of an innocent, character. So I don't think that character reads as much like an asshole as, say, the character he plays in this movie, who is clearly, it's a weird character because it's like, 'cause obviously he's our protagonist, and I guess we do like him.
That was my next question.
And we're supposed to like him, but at the same time, he's a dick. He's a dick
to
John Candy. He's a dick.
He's a dick to everybody.
Yeah.
So my next question is, he in the movie he's supposed to be this. So, do you think does he redeem himself by the time the end of the movie? Because at the beginning of the movie, you're saying he is our protagonist. You are getting some of those Chevy Chase-esque performance hallmarks where he says spits out a little joke at the end of the scene that he usually does, like, not fun, something, and you're like, oh, that's a Chevy Chase line, or you could tell that was an ad lib. But at the beginning of the movie, the script sets him up to be a dick. He's supposed to be a rich elitist who then is being knocked down to this world. But it seems at the beginning of the movie, it straddles the line where you're like, yeah, he's rich, but you're kind of like, it's almost like Dan Aykroyd and, well, I guess you're not supposed to like Dan Aykroyd in Trading Places. But it's like, Chevy Chase is not so much an over-the-top snob, but he is kind of snobby. And then, like you said, when we get into the car and on the road and the thing, he does choose to try to get away from John Candy, who's the cop trying to pull him over. So, when he finally gets pulled over, I don't know why he doesn't think he's going to be arrested, because he did try to outrun the guy. Not only that, he was the scene with he's going around the dump trucks. So he did put people in lives in danger. So. When you go through all that, and then by the end of the movie, I wrote that as a note. Chase is his character redeemable? I wanted to ask you, because near the end of it, it's like, is he supposed to come around, and he does save. At the end of the day, he's a good guy. He goes and tries to save Demi Moore and stuff like that. He doesn't try to run for his life on his own. Yeah. But
it's
what's
odd.
the intention of the script?
It's an odd character, because I feel watching it like. He didn't seem like a dick until he got to Vulcanvania. He seemed like he's nice to the door guy. The door guy's like, yeah,
it's true.
I used your tips.
That stock,
yeah. Like he seems
where'd
like
you
a
get
nice
that?
guy. He doesn't necessarily.
It's also for exposition, though.
Yeah,
but he shows his Thorn weekly letter.
But also, like, he seems nice to that guy. He seems to like that guy. He seems nice to Demi Moore.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, and he doesn't come off sleazy when he meets her.
Were you a parent of the age gap there?
Yeah.
Because when I first saw it, I didn't. I wasn't. I was like, it's just, to me, it's Chevy Chase trying to get with a hot girl. Well, all of us would be doing the same thing in his place. But then when you watch it now, it's like, how old is Demi Moore in this movie? In her 20s, probably?
Well,
maybe?
I mean, I think that happens with age, our age. You know what I mean? I think we become more, that becomes a much bigger thing. We become more like, I was just having this discussion with someone on Twitter about My Cousin Vinny, and I was like, because
that's another movie of this era.
Because as a kid, you don't really think about that. Joe Pesci is 1,000 years older than Marissa Tomei in that movie. But nowadays, when you watch it, and they knew that in that movie, and when we do that movie eventually, we'll talk about it. And they tried to make him look younger because they were afraid that he was going to look too much older. But I
love when we profile Fred Gwynn movies. Ralph Macchio.
But that is
but to hear it almost escapes. It's almost believable. I mean, at the end of the day, people, it's not unheard of that people of any age get into relationships of
especially
male or female.
Especially when a guy is wealthy.
Yeah.
It's not so much unheard of.
It's not. Yeah, and to me, I think if you waited another 3 years, Chevy Chase still looks good. But in another couple years, maybe by Vegas Vacation, he's starting to show his age, in my opinion. I mean, he's a freaking leading man in memoirs. He's running around, jumping around, and doing stuff, which is such an odd. I haven't done any back reading up to this date of memoirs. I don't know if you know it, since you're a Carpenter alumni and fan. What was the not to get into this either, but just what that begs the question: what was the attraction? What gave them the idea to cast him in a movie like that, memoirs? Because I know I never stopped talking. When I ended up working at the video store, I've told you this many years. Memoirs was always in the comedy section. And I used to get mad. I'd walk around and I'd tell my manager, "This is not a comedy. We can't have it in the comedy section. I'm putting this into thriller or horror." And they're like, "No, Chevy Chase is on the cover. It's a comedy. We're keeping it in comedy." I'm like, okay.
It's been a long time since I've read anything about that movie. So I could be incorrect. Because it's not one of the John Carpenter movies that I have done an immense amount of research on. But I want to say that was like a Chevy Chase. Like it was his thing. Like I want to say he's in it because he might have been the genesis of getting that movie made. Like he wanted to do it.
It's interesting because we covered Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein, same era.
Yeah.
And there was that resurgence in the early 90s of Wolf with Nicholson, with Frankenstein, De Niro, Branagh, Chase and
Dracula.
Carpenter for Invisible Man. Bram Stoker's Dracula with Coppola. And I feel like there's probably another one there. I don't know if someone did the Black Lagoon. So anyway, we're down a wormhole, but it's a very interesting character because he's not totally hateable. They don't put him off like you're right. He's not a douche at the beginning. He's not, because then, by the end of it, then he's redeeming, like, oh, he's a nice guy again. It's just that you're right. Once he gets to Vulcanvania, there is almost a class thing where, so as the movie goes, they get the other couple from Brazil to get in their car. The male actor in that, what's his face? Taylor Negron, I met on the street one day. I was crossing 6th Avenue and I almost bumped into him. And I looked at him, he looked at me, and he knew I knew him, and I knew he knew me, or I knew him. And then it took me like a half a day to kind of think about where I knew him from, and I was thinking he was the boyfriend in Christmas Vacation of what's-her-face from Seinfeld.
Yeah.
But then when we watched Christmas Vacation, or I was like, the next time I watched Christmas Vacation, I was like, that's not him. And then I realized, oh, he's the boyfriend in Nothing But Trouble, that guy. But...
Yeah.
He's part of a couple who are from Brazil. They get in the car with him for whatever reason. What is it? Demi Moore. She is a lawyer. She has to get down to Atlantic City to. You think she's trying to close a deal, but she's having an affair with the person she's also representing, I think. So she finds out who Chevy Chase is because he's kind of a big business market person. He's an investment counselor. He's a financial publisher, he calls himself. He has this magazine called Thorns Weekly, which evidently is good stock tips because, like you just said, we learned that the doorman, he makes some money off of it. So at least Chevy Chase knows what he's talking about because there's a lot of people in that industry who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And they use Chevy Chase's car, this BMW, to head down. She's going to drive Demi Moore down there in time so she can do whatever she needs to do. And I guess even though they don't know each other, I guess Chevy Chase is aware. It's very quick, the exposition, but it seems like he's aware of the deal that's going down, and he didn't know if he was going to go or if maybe it's a trade show or a convention down there. So Chevy Chase is like, I wasn't planning to go, and she's like, well, let me borrow your car. He's like, well, I didn't say I wasn't going to go. So something must be happening in AC that the business community is aware of. So they hop in a car. Chevy Chase is driving with the two other people, the couple from Brazil. And on their way down the Jersey Turnpike, they get off because they want to have a picnic. And then they get through this country, and then they go through one of these one-horse towns, which is Vulcanvania, one-road towns, which I love the billboard, which it has like a 50-0 billboard, and it's one of those, got to wear your seatbelt, drive 55. If you don't, it's a shame. And it's like there's a car crash, and the trooper from the Eisenhower years is like holding like a baby crying, so it's like the implication is that the parents died in the car crash because they were speeding. And Chevy Chase, he doesn't make a complete stop at a stop sign. He just kind of rolls through it. And that's what gets John Candy's attention in this souped-up cop car, which is at least by that time 10 years old. The Monaco, I think he's driving. And then it leads to this big car chase because they egg him on like Chevy Chase. Like, you're in such a high-end BMW, you can get away. And he's like, yeah, sure I can. And they kind of talk him into it, except Demi Moore. Demi Moore isn't like, she's like, I think this is a bad idea. And then John Candy, since he's in such a souped-up cop car, he's able to keep on him. And this is where the chase leads him into Vulcanvania. So you're right. Once he encounters John Candy, he's kind of a dick. He's like, I don't care who you are. And I don't know if they make fun of his weight or whatever, but, it leads it to like, where he makes him follow him to this area where it's the what do they call it? It's called the Valkenheiser Salvage. Yeah, what is the name of the is the grounds they go over, and there's like a moat, and this is all stuff where when we get into the expenses that they all built. They built like a working drawbridge, and then there's two matte paintings that are prominent in the film. One is when you see them going over the drawbridge, you have the wide shot of the moat that you can see is going around the whole area, and then when they get into the salvage junkyard, you see this big 90-foot high building they made that is very reminiscent of like Psycho's kind of a house, but it's kind of more supposed to be an old like church, or old schoolhouse, and on it says Court and Schools from 1898. It's the building in Vulcanvania, and that's the other matte painting, is you're seeing how wide the salvage yard is. It's almost reminiscent of like From Dusk Till Dawn, that shot at the end when you see the reveal, all the cars there. And then that gets them there to the judge, and you meet Dan Aykroyd there, and Dan Aykroyd's this crazy judge who's, is, and then, like you said, Chevy Chase starts mouthing off to him, and that gets him in more trouble. He could have just, I don't know how good it would have went, but maybe they would have paid a fine or something and just been on their way. But Chevy Chase starts saying, like, I'm better than you, what the hell, or, well, it doesn't say it like that exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think what, why I said the making of this movie I find very interesting is that, as we pointed out, like, the expense to make this movie is kind of, seems crazy when you look at it today. Warner Brothers basically, decides to go ahead with it. They decide to give it the green light with Dan Aykroyd saying, like, okay, we can't find a director, but I'll direct it. And they say,
yeah, we never finished that story where it's like, yeah, so they cast everybody and then they greenlight it, and then that was what you were saying. It's like they greenlight the movie, they don't have a director, so Aykroyd's like, shit, I'll direct it too. And they're like, okay, we're comfortable with you doing that.
Yeah, well, you've never directed a movie, but all right.
Sure, you're Dan Aykroyd. You've had a bunch of hits.
As Dion pointed out, Aykroyd wanted to play the judge Vulcanheiser as well as the Chevy Chase character, but Warner Brothers was like, well, what about putting Chevy Chase in that part? And he said, okay. And they also wanted John Candy in it, so he said, fine, we'll put John Candy in it. They give Aykroyd a budget of reportedly $40 million budget to get started. They start production on May 7th of 1990 in Los Angeles. So they build... they
build it all.
They build all these things on the Warner Brothers lot and in Warner Brothers sound stages.
Junkyards, the actual 90-foot facade of this building, all the interiors for this crazy, and they're not just making. That's the other thing. It's like all the set design that Michael Lanterry did.
Well,
he's Spielberg's guy who did Back to the Future 2 and 3, and he also did Last Crusade.
That's the thing, is that, like, Aykroyd knows, okay, I'm a first-time director. I'm going to be playing a part. He ends up playing two parts in the movie. He also ends up playing Bobo, which is one of, like, the mutant baby characters, because they couldn't find anybody else to do it. So he says, since I'm the first guy...
You would have did it.
I'm a first-time director. I'm going to surround myself with some of, like, the best people. So he hires Dean Cundy, who has appeared on this show many times, as director of photography. Of course, he did Halloween and The Thing, and so many great movies with and without John Carpenter. For production,
Spielberg stuff.
For production design, he ends up hiring William Sandell, who he's the one that does a lot of the sets. And he was coming off of RoboCop and Total Recall. So
that's insane.
As a production designer. For makeup effects, he hires David Miller, who had done Terminator, Dreamscape, and Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah. And then as they get into
that gives you an idea of where the makeup comes from, how Freddy Krueger with this, Dan Aykroyd kind of has the same kind of look.
And this Michael Lanterry guy that Dion was talking about, he worked with Spielberg, and he's a special effects supervisor. So even though William Sandell is doing a lot of the set design in terms of props and all that stuff, he brings in this guy, Michael Lanterry, who he's the guy that ends up creating all of, like, the mechanisms that we're talking about. He's the one
like the set pieces or
he ends up finding like the roller coaster, and he builds the table with the train in it. And so he builds like all the mechanical aspects of like the far out set pieces that Dion and I have been talking about this whole time about what one of the things that makes this movie kind of fascinating to watch. And the other thing that, in the research that you do, we find repeatedly being said that, like, the crew loved Aykroyd. Like, apparently, like, the crew just loved him. They would, obviously you get certain directors where the crew has some animosity towards them, or you hear all these stories about maybe first-time directors. The crew kind of tests the director by being kind of assholes to see if the director knows what they're doing. But Dan Aykroyd apparently and maybe it's from coming from sketch comedy and improvisation and all that. Apparently, he is the kind of director that would hear anybody's ideas. Like any guy on set was like, what would be really cool is I had my grandfather had a toy train and it would bring the food out. And Dan Aykroyd was like, yeah, okay, let's do that. He would hear
they're making some suggestions.
Hear all these outlandish ideas and be like, yeah, that sounds cool, let's do that. And not blindly.
Well, he'd turn them around and he would pitch them to Warner, and Warner would be like, sure. I mean, or they're like, oh, I guess.
Well, that's the other thing is that the fact that Warner Brothers gave this guy who had never directed a movie before, with clearly must have been a weird script to begin with, just gave him kind of free reign. People have blamed the fact that, they were making two big movies at the time. This was the smaller of the two big movies. The other movie was Bonfire of the Vanities, which they were shooting in New York, not in L.A. And apparently
also ended up being a huge flop.
Yeah, but apparently also had a lot of troubles going on during production. And so they were kind of preoccupied with Bonfire of the Vanities. So everything that Dan Aykroyd was doing was just kind of sliding in under the radar. I mean, even though...
Because this was supposed to be the lesser-known, smaller, like, okay, sure, it's the little comedy.
Yeah.
Bonfire was supposed to be the big release of that year.
But it was a $40 million budget, which wasn't huge for 1990, but... a 91, but still a pretty big budget. It ends up going reportedly $5 million over budget.
Yeah.
And at some point, they're using everything that the Warner Brothers studio has, like prop wise, in their department. And people are just telling them, like, you have to stop spending money.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, with the Sandell sets and then the Lanterry, these gimmicks. It's like you think about this is the era of practical stuff. So they built all this stuff. They had all they had all these cars and all these things, and they had to find all this stuff and they had to have all these practical sets. It's not like they blue screened anything really for the most part. And even when you look at the behind the scenes stuff of like the Stonehenge, they call it Autohenge, where it's the buses. They look like old buses, but then when you look at the behind the scenes, they actually built those buses to look old. So it's like they're fabricating all this stuff, and they're fabricating, like you said, Lanterry bought a old roller coaster for $15,000, and they repurposed it to come out of the house, which was part of the set. And then inside the stuff with the movable judges, the thing and all the stuff on the bench and the slide. So it's like they're building all this, and not only are they building, they're not just what I was saying before. Is they're not just building regular sets. They're building these like Texas Chainsaw Massacre-esque sets where there's a lot of set design involved, where you got to make it look like an old rotting house, and then there's all this that looks like a hoarder's dream from the turn of the century to like 1990.
Yeah.
All this practicality with, toasters and radios and any kind of gadget you could find that they're putting in there. So there's just so much like crap that's littered in there. And it's just like, this thing should have won something for set design because there's just so much story that's told that you're just supposed to just kind of absorb by just looking at stuff, like when they're in the attic and they're looking at all the license and they go by Hoffa's up there, or they go by Nazi, what's his face, the rocket scientists, all these people so there's this huge implication of all these cars and what this is supposed to mean and all this stuff, which plays into like the big twist at the end. Yeah. It's just it's mind blowing the amount of time that's spent in there and all the stuff that they actually shelled out to make. That just, it's like they need, like you said, they're like, you need to stop spending all this money or all this, it seems easier today. You could just draw it all, where back then you'd have to move everything in. And,
they say that like the set designers and the prop guys had to go out and bought like every toaster in the LA area so they could just put them in a pile outside of the house.
Which is weird, because that just means in the script it says there's a pile of toaster ovens, so it's like then they have to go spend, what do they spend, like $5,000 on toaster ovens or whatever, or they're fine. Like they said that I forgot where, but they found some guy who had a barn this elderly man on his farm who had all these old cars on it. So they like bought all the guy's surplus, and they had to put it on trucks, bring it to the Warner set, and then they had to destroy them in various levels of make them decrepit. So it looks like they've been sitting in a junkyard. So it's like they had to find all that stuff. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing I find. This stuff that we're talking about right now is the thing that I find most interesting about the making of it. You know, when we talked at the beginning about things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even Psycho, which was obviously like a very big budget, comparatively to other kinds of horror movies, but it was a universal picture by Alfred Hitchcock. You know, we talked about even Rocky Horror Picture Show or Hills Have Eyes. You know, it's a concept that is probably written that way because it's a very low budget. You know, a lot of horror movie conventions and story plots come out of the fact that you could do it on a low budget. Like, you know, Night of the Living Dead or Evil Dead. Let's take one location, you know, we can shoot it all in one location. It'll save us money. But here's like, Dan Aykroyd takes this idea that should be like a low budget, you know, independent horror movie comedy by way of plot, of concept of plot, and makes this, you know, possibly $45 million, like big budget movie. And then they go, that's fine, because you have still, like Deanna's been saying the whole time, you had people that were still stars at this time. So it had star power behind it. But the fact that Warner Brothers reads this script, lets Dan Aykroyd direct it like on a whim, on like, we can't find anybody else. Okay, I'll do it. And then just kind of like leaves him alone which it seems like, obviously they must be getting reports of the kind of money he's spending. We're hearing in the research that people are saying like, you need to stop the hemorrhaging, you know, of the money. Yeah. And just lets him make this totally bizarre studio picture that, I mean, let's face it, I don't care who's in it, like, really probably didn't ever have the chance of being like a huge success. You know what I mean? Like maybe it could have made its budget back.
Is it not a good movie? I mean, because under my impression, I don't think it's hit yet, but I think this is now garnered as a cult classic. I mean, I certainly now I'm categorizing it as a cult classic of the rewatch. I told you I had a friend of mine that I work with that absolutely loves this. So I don't think this is, to me, it's not like, we've watched a lot worse movies, I feel like, on this podcast that we're like trying to like hold up to an esteem, where it's like, this seems like.
But the weird thing is, those are movies that were more, you know, okay, maybe not No Holds Barred, but, you know, those are movies that I feel like were better received.
Yeah,
and like,
that's what I mean.
And really aren't that great.
I wonder why was it because maybe it was not bad marketing, but I wonder if it came out at a bad time. Like,
the way
what was it up against?
I mean, here's my theory of it, is that this movie didn't have a chance in hell of being like a box office hit. But it's the kind of movie that finds an audience in a way that before, you know, 1980, a movie couldn't find an audience, because there wasn't really this advent of like home viewing of movies. You know, like the VCR and video rentals changed the way people make movies and changed the way a movie could be received and how a movie could be successful. And that's why you got a lot of movies that didn't even go to theaters, straight to video, you know, and it still happens, straight to streaming or whatever. This movie found an audience because of VHS. You know what I mean? Like, this is the kind of movie that I can't imagine in what world they thought that this movie was going to be a financial success in theaters. But they didn't but I don't think they made it with the intention of like, oh, this will find an audience. And I don't know if it ever did make its money back, even in, you know, on a reported $45 million budget. It made like $8.5 million reportedly. Okay, now you add like the fucking $9 you paid for the DVD. You know, that stuff adds up after overtime.
Sure.
But
I don't know if there's somebody still checking that box. Okay, we sold another Nothing But Trouble DVD. You know,
somebody's obviously,
you know,
somebody's collecting the checks. I mean, they're happy to make the money. There's a record of it. I mean, I don't know if they're not updating the $8.5
That's what I'm saying.
million
Like, you know, so I don't know. Maybe they think that they're getting a new quirky Beetlejuice, a Tim Burton kind of movie. They're looking at something like Pee-wee's Big Adventure, something like
it was a weird
Batman just came out. You know what I mean? So they're like, if
it was a bizarre time, and of course, there's bizarre times and other. I mean, you know, there's movies like there's movies based on things like television shows where like you can say, okay, like HR Puffin stuff or the Banana Splits or whatever. Like that was a popular it's fucking weird as shit. But, you know, it's some kind of psychedelic trip that for some reason kids were force-fed that shit in the late 60s and the 70s, and they they liked it, so they made a movie out of it. And okay, maybe that movie did well because there was a built-in audience for it. So obviously there are examples of that happening. But you get into like the 80s and the 90s, man, and of course some of that is happening in the same way of like they're trying to hop on the success of something, like Garbage Pail Kids. They're like, okay, there's these trading cards, and kids love them for some fucking reason, and I do. I still love it to this goddamn day. That was a answer out of the regular Cabbage Patch Kid. Yeah, I know.
Craze.
But somebody was like, let's take these trading cards and we'll make a fucking movie out of it. And I don't
think that movie even saw a theater release. Right?
I bet you it did. I mean, I don't know.
Because I've never to this day even seen it.
Obviously, we haven't done it on the show yet, but
we've talked about it. It's been on the same list as Nothing But Trouble.
Yeah,
for years.
Okay, so like,
but it's one of those oddities. You're right.
Yeah. Okay, but it's like, okay, that's based on a thing that somebody had an idea. Yeah. Like, okay, let's do that. Mario Brothers, another example. Okay, it's a video game. Kids love Nintendo. Let's make that.
It. We'll make a movie.
You know,
they may be late with the idea, like 2 years, 3 years too late.
Yeah,
but at least they have
it.
Right. Well, but this is just totally a spec script.
These are all weird things, but it's like, okay, you can see the logic of it.
Yeah,
you know, like, okay, some businessman's like, this is popular. Let's make a movie, and those movies found audiences, you know, with kids in video. You know what I mean? Like, there's a whole bunch of shit like that. I mean, you could look at any of those video game movies, Double Dragon, you know, that, or even around this is the time of like Tank Girl, which was like a comic book property that like we didn't grow up with.
Yeah, a couple years later. This is you get into that's the era of Johnny Mnemonic. Like it's like that.
Yeah, you get like
late mid-90s,
the Johnny Mnemonic, and then like the Judge Dredd, and you know, but that's only like 5 years after this. I mean, that's not too long after this.
Well, Judge Dredd is going for the comic. Like they're trying to look at comic properties.
Yeah,
I think this is. I think this falls under the idea of that the maybe he's looking to make this a lot darker than it turns out to be, which is the rumor that then they re-edit it. Yeah. But I think you look at like Leatherface. What's that movie? That's the third Texas movie from the 80s.
Yeah.
And then you look at like Evil Dead 2, and how does Evil Dead 2 do around 89 or so? Right.
Yeah. My only point in comparing this to all those kinds of movies is those were movies that, yes, based on properties and comic books and all this stuff, but had that fucking 90s and late 80s weirdness to it.
Yeah.
And that was my only reason to compare them. It's like, even Judge Dredd, which is a substantial amount of years after this, it's fucking weird, that movie.
Oh, sure.
You know, and there was something in the air there in Hollywood where they were just making these weird movies. To your point, I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is probably the weirdest out of all of them. But that's mid-'80s, and then you get to the late 80s and early 90s, you get Leatherface. But, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, there's nothing to interrupt. So I wonder if they were just, you know, like, I feel like, say, you take Judge Dredd, where they did a serious one a couple years ago with Urban, which was really good, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And in the 90s, they kind of make it comic. They throw Rob Schneider in there as comic relief because they don't make it a straight. Like, you know, I love that movie the Stallone one. We've even talked about doing it on here. I mean, come on, Amanda Sante is amazing in that movie, and it's a fun movie.
Like it just fine. I saw it at the movies.
You know what I mean. And so did I. And then the ABC robots, freaking one of the awesome villains of all time, and the whole set design again, and all that, the prosthetics, But it suffers from. It seems like some of these studios don't have the balls or the whatever just to stick with it. And and like this movie, Nothing But Trouble, it's like, whatever the cut Dan Aykroyd had, it wasn't like you hear that he had like a 4-hour cut. It just was a lot more gruesome, probably in the vein of Evil Dead 2, to make it a little more of a dark comedy. I mean, so it's like, so they're doing Bonfire of the Vanities at the time, which is also of that area, have those kind of silly movies that ends up bombing, and they're not looking at this. But then when they do finally turn their attention to this movie, by the time this is either in post-production or whatever, they're like, what the hell do we have here? They take the movie, they recut it themselves, and then they put a new title on it and they put it out, and that ends up hurting the film.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I wonder if that... they say that the stuff that they took out were things like gore and stuff, and I wonder if it's a case of what we talked about when we did the first RoboCop, which is like the gore and stuff would have played up the comedy aspect of it. Like the outrageousness of what they were doing would have played up the comedy, which would have made it a little
satire,
more...
yeah.
Which have made it a little more acceptable. Whereas when we did RoboCop, we talked about how...
that went against it.
Yeah, like it was... they
made it more violent and horrific.
Yeah, like it was gory, but what happened was the studio ended up taking out like the over-the-topness of it that made it more satire and almost outlandish. And what happened is it just made it more brutal.
So it's like the scene with the Ed 209 when he shoots the guy at the beginning. They cut the 2 seconds out of him killing the guy. So if they kept the extreme of it all, would have been like, oh, this is ridiculous. It is kind of over the top,
almost.
Yeah, where when they cut it and they make it quick, it's almost very horrific. It plays completely, it makes it almost like, oh my God, it's so great. And I feel like here, so there's scenes. We move right along. I guess we could touch on some of the what happens in the movie. He keeps them for the night. They go down, whatever. Then you meet John Candy's his silent mute sister, who she's very funny in it. What's her name? Like Aldonia or something. But they get the second people that come, Daniel Baldwin, who shows up with a bunch of like Italian guys who John Candy turns over. They're doing drugs and all this stuff, and you get they're the example of his capital punishment where he ends up killing them with the bone stripper. The bone stripper, it seems like that gore was kind of maybe cut down. I wonder if, you see people going in, they get sent on this roller coaster that throws them on a conveyor belt right into this freaking big monstrosity of a machine, which is this beautiful eye candy. If you've got the belts going with the engines, and you have like the fire coming from the exhausts with the damn Yankee song, Bone Stripper, like heavy metal, like, it's like almost... Maximum Overdrive kind of, and these people get killed, and then you see the bones getting spit out the other end of it. I wonder if there was more, maybe there were scenes of them getting, I can't see actual scenes of them getting dismembered and killed, but, maybe there's a little more gore there.
Yeah.
To the end of it, where when they get Demi Moore out into the salvage yard, she is taken by John Candy's, the sister character who's going to get killed, but the mutant babies grab her, and you see her playing cards in a jail in a kind of a cell, and then the next minute she's out, and it seems like they jump cut a lot of that, where they have that machine come out near the end, then suddenly she's there. So I wonder if there's more. They just they're cutting this or that out, heads or tails of scenes.
One thing that totally flew over my head, and I didn't realize this was even implied until we did research on the movie, is that one of the things that we looked at research and said that the people that die in the bone stripper roller coaster are what the hot dogs are made out of, and I totally didn't land on me.
Well, when I was little, I always they do look gross, and then if you notice in close up, they're doing makeup. I think it's a clever swap where in close up they're making his Dan Aykroyd's judge nose looked like a penis head.
Yeah.
So, but then I don't think that's always like that, because when they're in the long shot, I don't feel like, but then when they go to a close-up of him eating a hot dog, it looks like the head of a penis, and you're like, oh my God, it's like, it's almost like Joe Camel suddenly, so it's like those big sausages, it's kind of funny, but I like that implication of more that the meat's meat and a man's got to eat kind of motel hell.
And I'm not saying
they should have played that up a little more.
I'm not saying the implication is not there. I just it totally didn't land on me. I mean, clearly they're gross looking. Like they're loosely packed sausages, so you have like the skin of the hot dog kind of like
they don't even look
over
cooked.
the
They're
edges.
gray. And it's like that. All that stuff is great. As the movie goes, they get stuck up in the attic. They're trying to get out of the house, and then it's like stuff I remember from the theater when he gets stuck in the walls and he's watching Dan Aykroyd in his bedroom take the stuff off. You kind of learn again. You find out that he's supposed to be 106 years old. This judge, he went to World War I. And in World War I, he loses his entire leg almost to the hip in combat in France. And while he's gone, his father or grandfather, who's taking care of the property, sells the oil rights to some crazy, to some oil baron in New York or whatever. And that's the reason why the whole land is depleted and it's left with these fissures or these burning, septic fumes because of what's going on underground because of the coal fire. So when he gets back, and then there's also a newspaper article that Chevy Chase sees that I guess there's a mine disaster, and that's where Dan Aykroyd's character is then burnt, I guess, beyond recognition. So then that gives you these puzzle pieces that you put together. That's why he's wearing a wig. He's got a fake prosthetic nose, because I always find that disgusting when he takes the nose off.
Yeah,
and you could see his his skull and his teeth. It's terrifying to me. So then he's elderly. So he looks old. They give him prosthetic hands and this kind of a thing. So you learn all this stuff by just looking at the set design or the set pieces or the exposition of what he evidently is, his character, and why he hates the oil people. I mean, it's these interesting little devices that I love to learn more of. That's why I said this movie begs a prequel.
Yeah.
To find out about all these people, and what his disdain is for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, for a guy that never has directed a movie before and clearly maybe had too much freedom during the production of it. That's debatable. But it is, you're right, in that it is like a fairly well-written script where it's interestingly told. This exposition comes out in a cinematic way and
and it's oozing with it.
Yeah. And of course there are lines of dialogue, but they're not like excessive monologues of like, this is what happened. In that way it is. It is very, it's cleverly done in terms of a storytelling and the way the story is told and the way the script plays out. And like I said, cinematically, them walking around the room and seeing visually these, even just like the licenses, you get a sense of everything, like the horror that they're in store for is instantly kind of revealed in that scene.
And the implication of they said a biker gang has gone missing, and then they look and there looks like there's skeletons. It looks like bikers that maybe they were stuck in the attic. Then they go down they find this escape to get out, and that once they're trapped up there's a safe that goes over the trap door, so they can't get out again. And then they have to go this other way, which is down a slide, which is in between the walls. And him and Demi Moore go down the slide, and they go the wrong way. And she goes out, shoots out into the salvage yard outside the house. He gets stuck in the walls, which is a hole where he sees Dan Aykroyd taking his clothes off, but there's all these bones there. So it's like, what's supposed to be implied of why because when he falls out, it's like there's hundreds of femurs and so you kind of figure out how many people have been stuck there and so more of the implication that they're eating the people, or how long have they been there, where he's got his bench set up where he's got buttons, he's got the organ buttons that are able to turn, he's got trapdoors that lead to the basement, or he's got another conveyor belt that leads outside to the bone stripper, the roller coaster ride. So he's these years of these things that he's mechanically engineered at the house out of old parts. It's just so fascinating that all and all these little buttons he has that they kind of justify this does this or that does that. So it's It's really ingenious. And then even the little lines are kind of funny. Like, or like when they're trying to get, so the female John Candy mute character takes a fancy to Chevy Chase, and suddenly they're going to marry her. And like Dan Aykroyd's trying to tell, the scene where the judge is trying to tell him to marry her, and he's like, marry her, you'll never have car trouble again. It's like, it's all these little funny jokes that just show up that just make the movie so weird. And then we get outside. Demi Moore is running around outside because she went down the slide a different way, and she runs into, this is where in the theater for me it hit Bizarre Town, where suddenly there's these mutant, it's another level of like, what the hell are these mutant babies? And we learn, like Blake said, that Aykroyd says he was having these dream nightmares of these mutant babies, and that's what he gets the idea to put them in the script. Fine, but it's like, what's the justification of whose babies are they? They're the judge's grandkids, so that leads you to believe that it's either John Candy's kids or the mute girl's kids, which I don't think they are, but they're not allowed in the house. And somebody said somewhere that I guess there is a infant. Is there such a element as having an infant body?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there very well could be. But also, I feel like John Candy and his sister are also the grandkids.
Yeah, I don't, because he says, John Candy, who I love, and in this movie, I think he's amazing with what little he's doing. He's great as the cop, he's great as the sister, and it's just like another tribute to like such an early loss, because he did JFK after this in a very small role in it, and then, which is a serious role. He's in Cool Runnings, and he does a couple other comedies, and he dies suddenly. So, which is such a shame. But, he's saying this like he's been staying at the compound since he was 8, or so you don't even know if he's the biological kin.
Yeah.
I would think he is. But then, the Rio couple who were able to escape, and they're able to get out. They're very funny. To me, they could have been very cliched, but in this viewing, they come off as kind of very funny. Fausto and his sister, because they're supposed to be like she's like the Brazilian Miss Brazil beauty queen or whatever. They convince John Candy to hide him, and then the end of the movie, then you have another scene in the movie which is just cut in through the madness of John Candy packing his stuff, listening to like maybe Hank Williams Jr., and he's packing his, he was a Marine. He's very, all his stuff and his badge. He's very proud of his police. It's his job as a cop by the book, which goes back to like Dan Aykroyd's affinity for Jack Webb and Dragnet, the movie they did, 10 years earlier or less than that with Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
That's the last scene you see of John Candy. He's packing his stuff up until the end. They're in Brazil, you would assume, and he's got this big, huge tuxedo on, and he's now the head of security there. He's now. Girlfriend is the Brazilian model sister, It's so great. Like that's the little end of like it's great. A lot of movies you wouldn't see what would happen to him, because of whatever reason they would drop his character. So it's great you do get an end to his character arc, which you don't really get to see all that much.
Yeah. I mean, clearly there's a lot of weird plot points and things that happen with the story, which I'm not sure how important it is to get into some of that stuff, especially because we've been talking about the movie for like 2 hours now. I mean, I think one thing that's worth noting is the cartoonish ending, which, like the final scene, which, has a little bit of a twist that Dion's saying. And, but like apparently, or reportedly, or allegedly, they just didn't have an ending for the movie, and so that's something that they just kind of came up with, which is, ends with Chevy Chase running through his apartment wall, which is very like a Tex Avery cartoon.
And you get the Warner Brothers, that sound, the beginning of the Merry Melodies kind of sound. Well, they end up escaping, and they get out of there. They get on a train. Great scene. That's where I was saying that action scene where it looks like they're really doing there's a lot of other interesting stuff that are going on. The machine that the silent woman is trying to kill Demi Moore with to get him to come out, because John Candy or Chevy Chase at that point is hiding, and then he grabs Demi Moore. They're able to escape. They get away. They get to maybe Philly or someplace. They get what's his name? They have Raymond J. Barney, who was also in Falling Down. He's the police chief. When we did our most controversial episode to date, our Falling Down episode, which we talk about in the taking of Pelham 123, why it's so controversial. He shows up as like the head of the FBI, and Chevy Chase and what's-her-face are telling them what happened. So they bring all the cop and SWAT teams down to raid the place. They get there, and then the big reveal there suddenly is that, which was a surprise to me in the theater, is that they're in on it. They know who the judge is. And suddenly, to me, it's frightening. That's like the scariest point. I mean, it's silly, but it's the scariest point of the movie to me, that they turn around and the 100 guys, SWAT, police of every ethnicity that are there are laughing like, "Hey, judge," and they're like, we don't really condone what he does, but he does it, and we sign off. We've been sending people here for years. So that's led to believe they're going to kill Chevy Chase and Demi Moore, and then the whole place blows up because of
that aspect of it. One, that guy is the guy that from Rapid Fire, the Brandon Lee movie that I love so much.
Nice doing business with you, Frank, or whatever it is.
And but that
Brian
aspect,
Doyle Murray.
That aspect of that story is very Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that, like I say, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And if we ever end up covering it on the show, I don't know. But one of the things I love,
I think we will.
One of the things that I think is so powerful about that movie is like how much of a genuine nightmare it is, which is like how hard Sally tries to run away from it. She always ends
She's
back.
just looping back.
Yeah, back in the spider's web. Which is,
she gets to the gas station. She thinks she's free because the old man is there.
Yeah.
And then finally the old man's parted. He brings her back, and look what your brother did to the door. So I only bring up the meandering of this is because it is like a Tales from the Crypt ending, where suddenly you laugh at it, but you're right. It's like a Texas. They're there, and it's like, oh my God, everybody's in on it.
They thought they're safe. They thought everything was going to be okay, and now it's not. And then they escape again because of the coal fire and destroys
everything. Blows up, and the whole place. They see the house actually collapse, and the whole place just finally blows up, and they think they're away, and they get back to New York City, and they're in his apartment or wherever they are.
Yeah,
and he's watching the news.
His apartment.
And this is what Blake
apartment.
was just saying.
Yeah, his apartment or her apartment, we don't know, but he's watching the news, and she's gone to go to wash off or whatever, and
take a shower.
And they're like, it turns out that there's a whole bunch of oil under all this, and then they're like,
so because of the high grade fire of everything blowing up, it's made of crude oil. So that means the Aykroyd, the Judge family is going to be, it's like 5 billion. They say something like 50 billion gallons of oil that they're going to get now. And then they find someone rummaging a reporter through their thing, and they turn around. It's the Judge character.
Yeah, like, excuse me, sir, what are you going to do now that the house is, now the town is gone and destroyed? He's like, well, because he married Chevy Chase off to his granddaughter, like Aldona, the John Candy female character. Like, well, my son-in-law lives in New York, and we're going to go there. We're going to go move in with him.
So that's another surprise I remembered from the theater, like the surprise ending where, oh my God, it's like he's not rid of them. He still has he holds up his ID. He has his license, so he has his address. He knows where he lives because John Candy collected all the IDs when he initially arrested him, and he's not rid of them. And and then begs a sequel, and that gives you said the cartoon ending where they didn't have an ending at that point, so they just have, which I think is a great ending, by the way.
Yeah,
another great twist. You have the twist of everybody knowing the judge, and then they get away because the place blows up. But then now in the rubble, he's still alive, and he's like, "We're gonna go stay with the in-laws," or the son-in-law, and he has the ID, and then that's where Chevy Chase just runs through the wall, and you get the
which it is like at that point. It's like, what else? It's like you talk. I think we talked about it when we did Dawn of the Dead. It was like, well, what else can we do? And then somebody's like, the only thing we don't have in this crazy movie is a pie fight. So, like I feel like
Let's
the
do
only
a pie
way,
fight.
like, how are we going to end this crazy thing? We'll end it like a fucking Looney Tunes cartoon. It's like, okay, that's as good an ending as any for this wacky show that we've just created.
And then while we're still here, the only other aspect is to talk about that there is a scene where when they're all stuck trying to get out, Demi Moore is stuck locked up with the mutant babies. They've recaptured Chevy Chase, and they're going to marry off Chevy Chase. Another car pulls up. It's a hearse. John Candy's, or it's the other girl who is from the Second City, because it was kind of like a semi-Second City reunion. The female deputy that's been with John Candy, she brings in the Digital Underground, and they were huge at the time. They were kind of a band that came out. They had this huge song called The Humpty Dance, like the year before, and they were kind of like an alternative hip hop group of the era. Right around when gangster rap's inception, they were kind of like almost punk Parliament Funkadelic of the 70s. They had a lot of influences from them of what they were doing at this time, and they were this big band that people the lineup would change when they would put different albums out, and they show up in the song and they're on their way. I guess they're speeding, and the judge is like, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're musicians, we're hip hop. And he's like, what's hip hop? And he's like, well, you got to play me a song. So they set the song, and suddenly there's this sequence of them singing, and you have all these people who people know because they were popular at the time. And then in New York, Yankees jersey, you see Tupac Shakur is there, and Tupac, this is his first movie. He wasn't really big at the time. He was just coming up as a hip hop artist himself, and he's guesting only on this song in the Digital Underground group. And they have a music video that comes out. The music video, the song is very widely popular. Dan Aykroyd's in the music video. Daniel Baldwin, who we just said, who plays a very minor role in the movie, he's in the video. And then it's one of these songs where they use the set in the music video. They're like outside in the junkyard, and they're singing the song. And you have like Dan Aykroyd, like they're showing clips of the movie, and they're showing them in the video. And at the end of it, when they're kind of when the song's kind of playing itself out with the loop, you see other people showing up in the video, making cameos. You have Eazy-E and Dr. Dre, when they were still part of NWA. They make a cameo saying "All Around the World," same song, and that's what Tupac is singing in the "All Around the World," same song in the movie. And in the longer song, he's got a little verse where he raps. But this is instrumental, where they say this song is supposedly because of the organ soloing in the song, which is attributed to Dan Aykroyd, which I don't know if he played it on the album, but this is supposedly the first. It's attributed to being the first hip hop song that has live instruments playing over sampled music, where they're riffing and making solos, and it won a bunch of acclaim and stuff like that. And Tupac ends up the next year doing Juice, which is a big movie, which is near and dear in my heart. So this is only in a year of each other. So he must have been filming at the same time. So it's instrumental, because a lot of people were like, "Oh my gosh, this band is showing up in here." And then it goes on next year, he blows up, and I don't know, Digital Underground's a kind of group that kind of came and went, and they've been touring for 20 or 30 years all around the world. Right when this came out, it was a perfect element to have them use it in, because they were the perfect band to have in. It brought in a whole other aspect of fanage. There's a great music video and all that. So I think Aykroyd had his head on right of not just putting a blues band or somebody in. Say what you will about the movie suddenly stopping down like the Blues Brothers and having a musical sequence, but if you were going to put that in, I think they were the right group to put in. So it's very funny that they just show up, and they become observers in the wedding, and they play the Tie the Knot song, which is also on the soundtrack. Yeah. And that's when Steve, when he marries him off. It is something,
if you ever want to just date your movie to a time.
Yeah, you throw a hip-hop song or one of those.
You put whoever is popular at that time musically in the movie, because music fad changes. The reason why I feel like that doesn't happen with the Blues Brothers is because the people that are in the movie are past their popularity. They get a resurgence of popularity because of their appearance in the Blues Brothers, some of them. But, it's like Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, James Brown, even Cab Calloway. Like, these are all people who, they weren't popular per se. Their highest...
But they're already part of Americana.
Yeah, like they're already in like the zeitgeist of R&B and popular music. What happens when you do something like this in a movie, which is you take the band that's popular at the time and you put them in it, it just like...
It's a snapshot.
It just puts a stamp on it, like in the early 90s.
Yeah, 91. It's
it'll
like
always be that.
What's his face? Vanilla Ice doing freaking, ninja.
Totally.
Rap. Suddenly, you're putting it's like having MC Hammer come out with his Pamela show. Oh, Pimba Power. It's like, so I completely agree with you that it does. It puts a big old, Department of Motor Vehicle stamp on. This is 1991.
Which isn't necessarily
but it's just
a bad
interesting talking
thing.
about because it goes in such a different way.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, wow. And then there's a video that came out, and that was the staying power for me at the time because I watched MTV as a kid, MTV Raps and stuff of this era. So I think a lot of the renewed interest I saw was because it was the song that had a hook, and the song was popular at the time. Yeah. So there was a music video that got played at MTV and stuff like that, where you might not get that today with having somebody, movie just stopping down and having a musical sequence, which is odd in itself usually, So this movie is just very weird. I don't know if there's anything else to throw at it that we haven't talked about yet.
I would just
Michael Kamen, the score.
Yeah, I was going to say the only other thing I would add, and it's more of a trivial thing, is that it was scored by Michael Kamen, who unfortunately died fairly young, sometime maybe in the sometime in the 90s or maybe the early 2000s. I'm not quite sure, but he was known often for classical music. I mean, he did like the score for Highlander. Obviously, a lot of that's attributed to Queen, but Queen did like the rock aspects of it. His score for Highlander, the classical stuff, is gorgeous. He did Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which was huge, and a huge
1990
huge score. He did the Dead Zone for Cronenberg. For some reason, that's one of the only movies that Cronenberg did where Howard Shore didn't do the music. Which there's actually a weird combination. Howard Shore is friends with Dan Aykroyd, and that's how Howard Shore got to work on Saturday Night Live, oddly enough, back in the 70s. But Michael Kamen, he also, I think, did the Lethal Weapon scores with Clapton. And we did the Lethal Weapon a couple years ago. So Michael Kamen was a big deal, and the fact that he came in, and it's not necessarily a classical score. At least for most of it, there's a lot of rock tones and stuff. But that would be. They have a
lot of like Damn Yankees and people coming in. They're using a lot of stuff in it. There's the sequence where was in this reviewing most relevant or prevalent to me is when they're following John Candy back, and this is your first introduction to Valkenville or Valkenvania. And there's this like blues guitar on in the background, and it's really good. So I didn't know if that was part of the Michael Kamen score, like that was just like the the non-diegetic music they have in the background when you're getting to like when they're noticing all the set pieces of the the different stuff on the yard and the real kind of like industrial art that's been made when they get to the moat. I was like, oh, that's some really rocking electric guitar, So I was thinking it's Dan Aykroyd meets Kamen, there.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you look at the soundtrack, that's a song they put on, because there's a lot of, if you look at it, it's aside from Shock G and the Digital Underground, there's a Ray Charles song in it. There's Frankie Valli, Big Girls Don't Cry, of course. You get even the Elwood Blues Revue doing Atlantic City, so they throw themselves in there. So it's a very eclectic soundtrack that was released and I guess sold pretty well. And being little, I used to always love when I saw the movie and then in the trailers was when he takes the Hawaiian Punch and he takes the gasoline neck and he puts it in. I always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was so cool. So that was always something like when I saw that, I was like, I remember I loved that joke when I was little. Yeah. So I think everybody's great in it. Demi Moore and John Candy and even down to the Baldwin brother, that has a brief appearance and stuff. And what's his face, Doyle Murray, who was just in Christmas Vacation as the mean boss. He has a very cameo at the end with Raymond Barney. It's just such an odd. So they finished the movie, and what's his face? They're going to release it as Valkenvania. Dan Aykroyd does a cut, shows it to Warner. I guess they test screen it, and the test screening isn't very positive. So Warner takes it, re-edits it to what we said, turns it from an R to a PG-13, I think. Takes a lot of the gore out because they think that's going to get it not an R rating, which, like we just addressed, takes out all of the satire and the comedic elements. And then they, at that time, retitle it to Nothing But Trouble. They have a screening for the crew, which nobody attends except for the crew. Like, no, Dan Aykroyd, none of the big people attend, the producers, because they're kind of mad about the recut. The crew loves it because they've been working on it for how long. And then the movie comes out, and then it's just sad because the movie just really bombs. What did you say? $40 to $45 million budget. I think it only makes $8 million in the theater, maybe. and nobody likes it. The all the critics you read about it are just. I mean, there's evidently a legendary story too, where Roger Ebert's in the theater trying to watch it, and people are talking. He actually walks over to the people, and being an asshole, he's like, "You need to talk louder so I can hear you, and not the terrible movie we're watching." Yeah. So it's like people just hated the movie, and I wonder if it was because it's the sign of the times. Stuff is changing where the world is. You're getting Wayne's World, you're getting these kind of comedies where this is kind of still that 80s kind of. If this came out in 85 and in place of Spies Like Us, would we had loved it more, or would it have done a lot better?
Yeah.
Three Amigos, So
yeah, I mean, apparently it was scheduled to come out in Christmas of 1990, and then when Warner Brothers finally saw it and were like, "Whoa, we can't. This is not going to make."
Whoa.
And part of the reason why they wanted to cut it down to PG-13 was just because they wanted a chance to make their money back. They kind of realized that this movie was not going to do well, but at rated R, you're limiting your audience who can go see it in the theater. So they cut it down to PG-13. It ends up coming out in February of 91, so it comes out kind of like two months later or so.
And Bonfire the Band of Vanities goes into the place of that, and that bombs.
Yeah.
And I remember that's another movie I've never seen, but at the time it was big news because on the cover of my local paper, the New Haven Register, there's front page was a guy in a trench coat, hidden his face, and he's in a room, and it's Tom Hanks had secretly come to Yale to do some research for Bonfire of the Vanities. So it was this big news, and everybody was like, "Oh, so I'd always heard this big drum up to this big acclaim, like it's coming out, it's going to be a great movie," and then I never saw it. It bombed, and I to this day have never seen that. Bruce Willis is in it, and some other people, and it's kind of like that movie that Danny DeVito directed with Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas, where they're
War of the Roses. Is that the name?
Yes, that movie kind of bombed as well, but it's them trying to kill each other, husband and wife, and I think instead of divorce, they're going to kill each other or whatever. Another odd of that movie, or what's the movie where Danny DeVito's the Other People's Money? Is that what it's called? Where he's like the rich guy, you know what I mean? Maybe there's a couple of those weird, quirky, or the Bette Midler movie where she's like kidnapped with Judge Reinhold, and they got masks. They're like, and they're hanging off a cliff with her and maybe Shelley Long. Does this remember this?
Yeah, I know. I can picture the cover.
Like there's like really weird these movies that came out at the time that just a lot of people, for all intents and purposes, forgot about. I think we should also mention too that they got what's his face to do a poster for it. Boris Valyahu. Am I saying that right?
I don't know.
He did all the Vacation posters. He'd done posters for I think some of the Star Wars movies, Q the Winged Serpent that Blake and I love. He'd done a rendition for this movie, a poster, and for some reason Warner decided not to use his poster, and they still went with that. What you see, the floating heads above whatever the iconic poster now is it is what they decided to go with, even though that you had this great guy Boris Valyahu doing it. And it's something where you look at the budget. The movie Warlock that came out soon after made more money than this movie, and I don't know. To me, it's sometimes you could see. It's weird. I don't mean to keep bringing up the same point, but it's like sometimes you could see why a movie does bad in a sense where the script is terrible or the acting is terrible. Where this, you could see you could see in this movie why it did bad, but you can't see feel like it could have had an audience. Like there's all headlining actors. You have the best people in the industry doing the special effects, the makeup, the set design, the music. It only was made because you had the best people in Hollywood connected to it, but it just didn't, for whatever reason. And I wonder if it's just because of the changing times, or if there's something else that was huge in the theater at the time.
I think
Secret of the Ooze.
We talked a lot about, and I've mentioned I've used the word weird a lot, and I think that is a perfect example of a reasoning. And when I say it, let me put it in a different way. Of when you get something that's so weird, you could also say that it's unique. And when you say that it's unique, you're saying that it's very specific. And I think when you get something that's very specific, it means it only really appeals to a certain subset of an audience. And I think
Yeah.
this is an example of that. It's not a movie that would have wide appeal.
Like a Buckaroo Banzai or like a Naked Lunch. Like,
Yeah, there are people that respond to it, and I think it's the kind of movie that you just find on video or you find running on cable and you watch it, and in that context you connect with it. But to shell out $4.25 or whatever a movie cost back in 1991, to go and make an event to go to the movies, which it still kind of was back then.
Hey, I saw this in the theater.
No, I mean, but like,
yeah.
it doesn't.
Sure.
It's harder for people to connect to it, and that. And we also don't know. I mean, we didn't do the research to find out what else came out on February 15th of 1991. You know what I mean?
I feel like it was overshadowed by something. That
Like,
we're
what
missing,
were the
that
movie-
something was big.
What were the movies that it was competing against? Because that could also have a huge impact.
Yeah,
on
impact
it.
of what it. Yeah, it's like Sorcerer coming out the same weekend as Star Wars. It's like there's something. I feel like that we said Secret of the Ooze is out around there. Mario Brothers is out around there. What else is out around? Posse's out around that time. Young Guns 2's out around maybe around this time, 1990. Blaze of Glory, Bon Jovi. You got a lot of those music videos that have that are connected to the movies.
What about Terminator 2?
Terminator 2 is July of 91.
Yeah,
That's July
so that
3rd,
comes
91.
out later.
Yeah. What else is out 91? I feel right before Dick Tracy's 1990. Ninja Turtles. I'm just thinking of what I was into. That's usually a barometer. Like 5th grade, I was Dick Tracy. New Kids on the Block were big then. And then 6th grade is like Secret of the Ooze and more Ninja Turtles. And when does Spawn come out? Is Spawn?
Oh, that's not until late. That's not until like the late 90s.
93 or so.
No, that's that's
94?
like Spawn. That's like like 97, 96, 97.
Really?
I think. Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say because I didn't think we were like for example, I know you saw Blues Brothers 2000. I to this day have never seen Blues Brothers 2000 all the way through. But then when I looked to see what year Blues Brothers 2000 was, that's 1998. So that's crazy. So I already knew you by the time when you went to go see Blues Brothers 2000. And that's a movie that again flopped and for various reasons, but it had like a huge cast and they were trying to reinvent that Blues Brothers mythos, and Dan Aykroyd's helming that again.
Actually, I'm looking at it. 1991 has a lot of really interesting movies come out. I mean, none of them around that time. None of them would be kind of movies that you would like. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, or not necessarily.
1990, yeah, but but that's a movie that finds an audience. So
yeah,
I wonder if
that's not necessarily a movie that would be the reason why this didn't find an audience at the time.
But I wonder if it's because the studios were taking a chance doing these crazy movies, and then the zeitgeist was changing toward these. You're going to get in a year or two. You're getting the birth of the indie movie. Like what year's Clerks? Yeah. So you have that whole 90s boom of indie movies and quirky comedies. So I wonder if it's just this is part of the transition where you're still trying to use the old lineup in a newer movie.
Edward Scissorhands that came out around Christmas of 1990, so that could still be in theaters at that point.
Yeah, and that's huge. That was huge when that came out at the time. Speed, I think Speed's maybe around this time. You're getting what year is maybe Demolition Man could be around this time as well.
Getting Never Ending Story 2 comes out in February of 91.
Yeah. What's the
FX2?
We love FX2. We love it a lot.
LA
or
Story.
even LA Story.
That was
what's the other one?
Steve Martin, right?
Yeah, Tango and Cash is what, 1990? What's Cliffhanger? Cliffhanger's 92? Because Stop and My Mom Will Shoot.
Now
Remember,
it's just
he does
us
the two
now
comedies.
it's just us.
Yeah, now we're just spitting out the last bits of this podcast. Are just us completely
yelling out
speculating.
titles of movies.
Yeah. But I feel like
Anyway.
he did the two comedies. He did Oscar 1990. So there's, those were big movies, freaking, so I wonder if people are going more to those big set piece Terminator 2s, the Arnold movies at the time, and the Sly movies at the time, the Seagal movies at the time. Under Siege, Marked for Death. Those were big movies when they came out. So Marked for Death we already covered on this podcast this year. So I wonder if just people were in the wrong headspace for this. Yeah. So I'm glad we did it. Yes. How many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop? I never made it without biting ass, Mr. Owl. Mr. Owl. James Mason's Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop.
Anyway.
1, 2, 3.
If anybody's still listening.
Yeah. So I'm glad we covered this because it was kind of like, do you really want to? I was like, well, you know what? I feel like 1, this movie needs some love. 2, I don't remember hating this movie. I remember really liking it when I saw it. And 3, I have it on DVD.
Yeah.
And hopefully this one day will get a Blu-ray release, which will be also widescreen. Maybe we can get some extras with it. And hell, if Dan Aykroyd has the time, maybe he can somehow get I would love to see the director's cut of this. That'd be freaking awesome. That'd be a big event for like Blue Midnight or whatever whatever they'll call those, whatever Anchor Bay's turned into. Blue Underground? The Digital Underground can help release the Blue Underground. Get a commentary by Humpty and Shock G and everybody. So anyway, and then one of the special features could be the music video. See, we've got the whole thing planned out.
Commentary by us.
Yes. So, this movie, Demi Moore, look at that white dress.
Anyway.
So, yes, thank you very much for listening, right? We hoped you liked our little special a couple of weeks ago, The Black Hole Revisited, the sidecast. Not everybody liked it, but enough people liked it.
Some people were disappointed, but, you can't please everybody.
Yeah, what do you want for nothing? And then we're going to be back in a couple of weeks. We got another special or two down the pike as well. They just poop out while we're doing stuff, and then in a couple of weeks we'll have another all-new episode, which we might have already hinted at, but I don't want to say anything because sometimes when we do that, people may, we used to have people who we would just name the year, and then we'd have someone mail us and say, "You're doing Terminator 2," and we're like, "How did he know?" So I don't know. But what else? Anything you have to talk about closing up the shop?
Nope. Just check me out on what's it called? Social media at Scored to Death. And, of course, you can check out my book, Scored to Death, Conversations with Some of Horror's Greatest Composers. It's available on Amazon from other book retailers in both ebook and paperback. And you can buy a paperback from me directly at scoredtodeath.com. And, of course, Dion Baia has Blood in the Streets.
Yep, you can get that on Amazon or any place you get your books. You got paperback, ebook, audiobook, something if you're looking for something to do around now, give it a listen, give it a read.
If you DM Dion, he'll read it to you over the phone.
I'll read it to you over the phone. I'll call you up long distance, Ma Bell, and be like, "Hello." It starts at the end by Dion Baia. So, check those out. Check us out on social media. You can check me out on social media. You can check the show out on social media. With Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers, we got a website. You can check the website out. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. One day we'll maybe be on YouTube if we get our act together and spend the time to put ourselves on there. And then, we can send us suggestions, comments, questions, concerns. I saw we had somebody messaging us actually during this recording, which was fun. So that's always good, the fan interaction. And we'd like to thank everybody who's checked in on us during these trying times. Right? People have been messaging us and asking us how we're doing in New York. And, we're hoping everyone else is doing okay. And we'd like to say, we're thinking about everybody with everything still ongoing, and our thoughts and prayers are with you if you've been affected by this, by losing a loved one during this epidemic, or if you yourself have been affected by this. So, keep up all the stuff that everyone's been saying to do, and we're trying to do our little part by making a bunch of nonsense on the record so that you can listen to later on whenever you're doing stuff. Bring a little laughter to the world, right, Mr. Blake?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in my woods, exactly. And we'll be back very soon for another... hey, you know what? What is this? This is May now, right? So, Jesus, we're going to be entering the summer months.
Yeah.
The 2020 summer movie extravaganza. Last year was the summer of sequels.
I know. We really haven't given... With all that's going on, we haven't... behind the the curve.
The
We haven't really
proverbial
put a whole
8-ball.
lot of thought into what
because
shows
we've been
got
trying to
coming up.
flatten the curve. We haven't really thought much about, so we're behind the curve on our own. So I think it'll be a fun, enjoyable. We have some tentative stuff. We've been meeting with a lot of groups and taking, well, we haven't been because we've been social distancing, but I mean, we've been polling and stuff. So I think we have a kind of a blueprint of what this summer is going to be like. But it's going to be a fun summer. So, we'll hope you enjoy it. And as always, we will see you very soon.
Later.